Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Time to go home and face his past. Scene was under no illusions. He knew that meeting his parents would be difficult. They are offended by him. He himself has no desire to communicate with them, but the man did not even think about living in his parents' apartment. He rented himself a hotel and spent almost the entire first day in the room. He had no idea that meeting his family would be so hard. Already in the evening, Scene entered a familiar courtyard. He went up to the second floor of an old 5-story building and rang the doorbell. His father opened the door. A former officer, he had always prided himself on his ability to keep a straight face in any situation. But now Scene, even with a kind of pity, noted the unconcealed surprise on his father's face. Plus, it was impossible not to notice how much he'd aged. "What are you doing here?" Alex asked. "And I'm glad to see you, Dad," Scene grinned back. "Did you and your mother think I wouldn't come? That I'd let you guys just barge into my life like this?" Fiona looked out into the hallway. "Who is it, Sasha?" she asked her husband. "Scene's here." "Scene? Scene who?" the woman asked. "Your eldest son," Scene grinned. "The one you'd rather forget about." "What are you doing here?" the woman asked in surprise. "You said you wanted nothing to do with us and that you weren't going to help us even if we crawled to you on our knees and begged for help." Scene nodded. He was ashamed of those words, but he really meant it. His mother wasn't exaggerating. "Why don't you let us into the apartment?" he asked. "Don't worry, I won't be long. We'll talk and then I'll leave." Alex shrugged his shoulders. "We didn't kick you out of the house," he reminded. "You left on your own." "Yeah," Scene agreed. "I left on my own and you did everything you could to make me want to. But that doesn't matter now. I assume you need some kind of help from me since you decided to get to me through Allison. Let's not get all comedic and pretend like you have no idea what we're talking about. Just tell me what you need. I'll take care of it." "Who's Allison?" Fiona asked. "Allison is my wife. There's no need to pretend you don't know that." Alex looked at his son. "Apparently, we should congratulate you on your wedding. How long have you been married?" "A long time," replied Scene. "Okay," waved his father's hand. "Come on in. We'll talk. I understand you're having problems with your wife and you think it's our fault." Scene nodded. "That's exactly what it is," he confirmed. "You did it with some kind of intent. You probably need help. I'll help you. Just tell me what you told Allison." "We didn't say anything," Dad said. "And we didn't even know you were married. I know it's hard for you to believe, but not all the trouble in your life is our fault. You're used to blaming us. My wife told me that I've been lying to her since the day we met. That I was hiding something from her." "What could I be hiding besides you?" Scene asked. "You should ask her more," Fiona suggested. "She's gone and I can't find her." The father grinned. "What?" he asked. "Turns out you're not perfect at everything either. Turns out you're not perfect at anything." Scene ran his hand over his face tiredly. "We haven't talked in years and I still can't figure out what's wrong with me. Or what's wrong with you. I'm your son, and judging by how much I look like both of you, I'm native, not adopted. So why do you dislike me so much? I've never been good enough for you, for our family." Fiona got up from her chair and walked over to the window. "We love you and always have. Except it wasn't enough for you. You were always demanding attention. You kept pestering us with your talk about how Edgar should be raised." Scene didn't disagree. They'd had this conversation 1,000 times. "So you didn't talk to my wife?" he asked again. "No, we haven't," his mother replied firmly. "We've known for a long time that in case of trouble, you are useless to count on. And to tell the truth, we have nothing to help us now." "All right," Scene nodded. "I trust you. And Edgar? Where is he?" "He could have written to my wife." "No," Alex replied. "It's not him. We know that for a fact. I wonder why I should believe you. My wife and I are having problems. She won't talk to me. Kicked me out of the house. Says it's because of my past. And I'm at a loss as to why. What? Your parents might have intimidated you and said some unpleasant things," Thomas guessed. "They have a way of being threatening. On the other hand, they can be very polite and sweet. You think because they won't talk, It's their doing? Kind of. Okay, I'm gonna try talking to Allison again. If that doesn't work, then I'll call my parents. I didn't even know you were married, Thomas muttered. How long has it been? 5 years. You haven't got married? I've been married and divorced. We were married for 2 years, but it didn't work out. And now? I'm still single. I work. Nothing good. Listen, why do your parents want your wife? You've been married long enough. They haven't cared about her all these years. Why now? If I knew, Scene stretched out. So maybe it has nothing to do with your family. Allison said I've been lying to her since day one. And I've never lied to her. The only thing I've never told her is the reasons why I'm not in touch with my family. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Okay, I tell you, call me, he said. But I don't think you and I have anything to talk about. Too much water has passed. Scene didn't argue. He said goodbye and hung up. For a while he thought about calling his parents, but then he decided it was better to talk to his wife first. The next day after work, the man drove to his house. He was ready for any development. If necessary, he would convince Allison to let him in and listen, and if that didn't work, he would just break down the door. But tonight he and his wife would definitely talk. He went up to this floor and rang the bell. To his great surprise, the door opened instantly. Scene expected that his wife would avoid the conversation, but Scene was even more surprised when behind the door was a complete stranger. Who are you? Scene asked. What are you doing here? I live here, the woman replied. We're renting an apartment. We moved in today. Everything is legal. We have a contract. Yeah, Scene nodded, confused. I don't mind. I'm sorry. Have you and Allison been in contact? Yes, the woman confirmed. Do you know her? I do, Scene nodded. I've been looking for her. Do you know where she lives now? No, I have no idea. She just said she was leaving town. That's it. She said she'd call. And that I could send money to her card. I'm sorry. She waved her hands. I didn't know anyone was coming to see her either. If she calls, can I give her a message? No, thank you. Nothing, Scene said. Allison didn't answer her phone. Scene realized his wife had decided to just run away. Now he was getting really worried. This wasn't like her at all. Allison was never impulsive. She usually weighed her actions carefully. And most importantly, the girl never avoided talking. That's why Scene thought his wife's actions were not only strange, but also very disturbing. A few days he still tried to call her, and then he took a vacation and went to the only place where he thought Allison could be. The town where she'd grown up. Allison, unlike him, never hid her past. She was eager to share her childhood memories. And despite the fact that her parents were now living abroad with their eldest son's family, Scene and Allison had traveled several times to the place where Allison had spent her childhood. Scene knew only one friend who lived there, so he went straight to her. Catherine was very surprised by the visit. I haven't seen Allison in 3 years, she said, since the two of you went on vacation, and I haven't spoken to her in weeks. What's going on with you two? I wish I knew, Scene replied. Look, Catherine, help me out here. I know you're on your friend's side, but I don't even know what this is about. I need to figure out what I did wrong. I didn't cheat on her. I didn't lie to her. It was nothing like that. Tell me, is there anyone else she can stay with here? Or maybe she has another phone number. I don't know another phone number, Catherine answered, and there's no place for her to stay. That's for sure. No, she has no one else here. So the girl waved her hands. I cannot help you. But even if I did, I wouldn't help you. Allison doesn't just take offense. You must have really hurt her. Scene sighed tiredly. There was no point in changing Catherine's mind. He saw that his wife's friend was telling the truth and really had no idea where Allison was. There was no point in going home either. The apartment was rented out. Allison might be in town, but definitely not at her friend's, and where to find her Scene had no idea. Also, he's on vacation, the man sighed. It seemed if he wanted his wife back, or at least to understand what was going on, he only had one option. But, you kicked me out of the house, you refused to talk to me, and you won't tell me why. Don't you think I deserve some kind of explanation? We've been married for 5 years, and all that time you've been lying to me, the girl replied. And lied so sincerely that I never even suspected that you are dishonest with me. And now I don't want to listen to you, because I'm afraid to believe you again. Allison, I don't know who told you what, but maybe it's not me. Maybe it's them. I don't think so. I checked everything. I have proof. Proof of what? Sean demanded. You wrote that you wanted to tell me something. Allison changed the subject. Tell me, because I'm not going to continue discussing our relationship. I saw you with a man last night, and he's the reason you broke up with me. Me with a man? Allison was surprised. What man? Have you forgotten already? Scene's voice was full of sarcasm. In the courtyard, and he stayed in your apartment for quite a while. I never waited for him to come out of the driveway. Don't tell me that's our new neighbor. No, said the girl. It's not a neighbor, it's a realtor. A realtor? Scene was surprised. Why do you need a realtor? First of all, the apartment is too big for me alone. And secondly, it's our joint apartment, and I thought it's not fair that I live there and you have to rent. So I want to rent it. We'll split the money. And when the time comes to divorce, we'll decide what to do with it. By the way, I haven't filed for divorce yet, but I think I'll do it soon. I hope you won't be an obstacle. I'll sell the apartment and split the money, or you can buy out my half, or we could split it. Well, I'll take any of those options. Allison, oh yes, his wife interrupted. I wasn't thinking. I've decided to rent it out, but do you want to live there? I can move out the day after tomorrow. I just don't understand why you're in such a hurry. Stop, Sean. Please stop. Are you hurting me on purpose? I don't understand. Do you really not care about your past, about the things you've kept from me over the years? You think that's okay? What past? Why don't you explain? I put all our stuff in the garage. They're in boxes. There's dishes and clothes. The boxes are labeled. You have the keys to the garage. In a perfectly even voice, Allison began to list. Everything I need, I took. If you need plates or pots and pans, you can have any box you want. Photos, your notes, and other papers are in a separate box too. It's mostly stuff that belongs to you, so get that box out of the garage, or you'll never know. That's it, bye. Allison. But the girl had already hung up. Scene threw the phone on the table. What the hell is going on? What had he been hiding for 5 years? His family? Yes, he had, but why talk about them? He tried not to think about them and certainly didn't want to tie his new happy life with memories of them. Scene shook his head. Okay, he needed to call his friends, find out what was going on with his family and loved ones, figure out what they'd said to Allison and most importantly, why. And give his wife a few more days to come to her senses, and then she wouldn't get away from him. They'd have a serious talk. Scene contacted his best friend from high school. Thomas was very surprised. They hadn't spoken in years. Something serious had happened. Thomas grinned. You wouldn't just call. You've cut your whole family out of your life, and with them all of us. Scene nodded. His friend was completely right. What is, he agreed. I'm sorry when I left. I was really angry, both at my parents and at the circumstances. I didn't want anything to do with the past. And then somehow, I see, Thomas replied. What happened now? I don't know how to explain it. Anyway, I think that someone from my family has started to interfere in my life again. You wouldn't happen to know anything about them, would you? No, I saw your parents about 1.5 years ago. Same old, same old. They live in the same place. We were walking together from somewhere. They said hello, asked how they were doing, and that's it. They didn't tell me anything about you or ask me anything. They said your brother was doing well. He's settled down. He's getting married. Why do you think they're meddling in your life? Scene sighed. What? Anna's face was so shocked that Scene believed that the girl knew nothing about it. He sighed tiredly. When was the last time you spoke to her? A week ago, Anna answered. Everything was fine then. Wait, how could she kick you out? Why did you leave? And why didn't you even ask why? She changed the locks while I was on a business trip. She won't answer my questions. Of course, I'm gonna go over there and try to talk to her. But I thought I'd give her some time and figure out what's going on first. That's why I came to see you. Anna, for God's sake, if you know something, don't say anything. Does Allison have someone? Yesterday, I would have said no, Anna said. But now she's throwing up her hands. I don't know what to tell you. Wait, I'll call Amanda. Amanda can't stand me. She won't help me. Wait, let's find out if she's aware of the situation or not. The girl called Amanda. She didn't know anything about the latest developments either, but she was excited. Scene heard her tell Sveta. She finally came to her senses and dumped that idiot. Maybe she'll be happy now. When Anna finished talking, Scene looked at the girl. Will you go to her today? He asked. We will, of course, Anna answered. If you find out anything, will you tell me? I don't think so, she admitted honestly. Allison is our friend. I'll protect her. If I think she needs your help, I'll call you. And if not, then I'm sorry. Scene didn't expect much more than that, because the main thing he'd learned from today's meeting was that his wife hadn't kicked him out of the apartment at the instigation of her friends. So there was another reason. The next day, Scene decided it was time to talk to Allison directly. He left work early and drove to his and Allison's house. He parked the car far away so as not to spook his wife and waited. Soon he saw her car pull into the yard, and another one right behind it. Scene watched as his wife parked in her usual spot and the second car parked in the spot where he usually parked. Scene didn't know why he didn't get out of his car and walk towards his wife. Some unknown force was keeping him inside. He saw Allison. She took her purse, closed her car, and suddenly smiled broadly at the man who had arrived in the second car. They struck up a conversation. He took the purse and the bag of groceries from Allison's hands, and they walked toward the driveway. Scene was just taken aback. Before this, he'd been looking for reasons in himself. He thought he'd made a mistake or hurt his wife, or there were no other reasons. But it all turned out so banal and simple. His wife has a lover. His favorite, gentle, honest Allison deceives him. And by the looks of it, she's been cheating on him for a long time. Scene angrily started the car and drove out of the yard. She wants a divorce? Fine. He'll give her a divorce. But he's not gonna play the noble knight anymore. If she's found someone better, he's gonna have to provide for her. Scene wasn't gonna leave his unfaithful wife half his apartment. He'd insist on a property settlement. Scene drove around town for a long time, trying to calm down. He didn't get back to his apartment until late that night. He felt sick to his stomach. For the first time in years, he felt like there was no place for him in this town. Allison was his whole world, his universe, and he couldn't imagine how she could do that to him. The next morning, Scene regained his composure, calmed down, and began to think more rationally. Even assuming that his wife had another man, why was Allison hiding him? She's a rational girl, and changing the locks and not answering her husband's calls isn't the answer to the problem. Scene realized he needed to look into this in more detail. While he still didn't know the reason for what was going on, he needed to talk to his wife. Scene decided to send her a message. Allison, I respect your privacy, but I need an explanation. Either you will take my call, or I'll be waiting for you outside our apartment. You can't avoid me forever. Allison almost immediately called him herself. What else do you want from me? The wife asked. I want to understand what's going on. Scene, I've told you several times that I don't want to discuss anything with you, and I'm not going to explain anything. Yes, he finally heard his wife's cold voice. Allison, honey, hi, it's me. I'm here. I can't get home. Did you change the locks? Well, if you can't open the door, I changed it, the wife replied curtly. Your 2 suitcases are at the neighbor's, Barbara. That should be enough for now. Then I'll pack the rest and call you and let you know when you can pick them up. Allison, I don't understand. What stuff? What am I supposed to pick up? He asked again. My stuff. My computer. Clothes. What's not to understand? The girl clarified. I don't understand why I have to take my things. Where am I supposed to live? I don't know. I'm sure you'll think of something. Your imagination is good. You have a lot of friends in the city. Don't worry, I know we share an apartment, and I can't just dispose of it like that. Yes, you can, but legally it's your apartment. Wait, what does the apartment have to do with it? Do whatever you want with it. I don't care. Why can't we live together? Why did you pack my stuff? Did I do something to offend you? Yeah, I got held up on a business trip, but I warned you, and I don't think that's a reason to kick me out of the house. It's not, Allison agreed. It's a different reason. Did you have someone else? Scene asked. Have you fallen out of love with me? Do you want to get a divorce so you can get married again? I have no one, the girl replied. You're the one who cheated on me. I didn't lie to you. I don't want to talk anymore. And don't pretend you don't know what's wrong. Don't call me anymore. If you need anything, write to me. I'll give you everything. Allison, wait. Let's meet in person. No, the girl said firmly. I don't want to. I'm done. I've talked enough in 5 years. And Allison hung up the phone. Scene stood by the door of his own apartment, confused and unable to get in. He slammed his fist against the wall with anger. What's going on? Why is Allison acting like this? Scene sighed. There was no choice. Gotta get his stuff. Find an apartment. After all, he had to go to work tomorrow. He'd deal with Allison later. But naturally, whatever Scene did during the day, he thought of his wife, remembering her every word, looking for clues. Allison said he cheated on her. Scene even thought she'd somehow found out about his conversation with the girl at the roadside cafe. But he still didn't see what the big deal was. So he talked to the girl, helped her, sympathized. Allison herself was always ready to help. She would never condemn Scene for such a deed. And how could she know? Then the man remembered about his wife's friends. One was divorced. The other seemed to be married and even, according to Allison, was happy. But she didn't like Scene. If either of them had seen him with Shanna then, but no, that would be silly too. How do you change a lock in 40 minutes? Scene shook his head. No, nonsense. Allison had obviously changed the lock before. But what could have happened? In their entire life together, they'd only had one serious fight when Scene's first love had suddenly found him on social media and started texting him persistently. Scene had the indiscretion not only to admit it to Allison, but also to show the correspondence. At the time, he thought the whole thing was funny, but Allison scolded him severely. She said that the girl might have serious feelings for him that she was hiding. Allison told him to write the girl the truth, to admit that he was married. When she didn't stop writing even after that, Scene blocked the girl. These events took place a couple years ago, and since then in their relationship with Allison reigned full openness and mutual trust. At least, that's what Scene had thought until today. Scene had been living in a rented apartment for 2 days now. Today, he decided to meet one of his wife's best friends. The girl refused to answer his questions, and now she didn't answer the phone at all. So he went to see Anna after work. "What's going on with my wife?" he asked, approaching the girl. Anna jumped with surprise. "Your wife? Did something happen to Allison?" she wondered. "There's no need to make a circus of it." Scene said indignantly, "I know you know. Why did she kick me out of the house?" Scene was in a hurry to get home. The business trip had dragged on. He was supposed to leave for 3 days and was away for a whole week. But there wasn't much time left. Just a couple more hours and he would meet his beloved wife. It would be nice to get there early before Allison left for work. Then he wouldn't have to wait another day to spend time together. Scene and Allison had been married for 5 years. They were soulmates. They hardly ever fought. They loved spending time together and tried not to be apart for long. They only had one reason to be sad. They couldn't have a baby yet, but they were still young, healthy, and hoped that soon they would experience this happiness. Scene suddenly hit the brakes sharply. He was thinking so much that only at the last moment he noticed the car jumping out in front of him. Fortunately, he was able to brake in time and there was no collision. Scene jumped out of the car and rushed to the second car. There was a girl behind the wheel, looking completely dumbfounded. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm not hurt?" "I'm sorry, please, I'm sorry," the girl begged. "I'm so sorry for you. I've been thinking. I'm just having problems at home. With my husband. We're getting a divorce," she cried. "Listen, girl, I understand you're upset. I'm glad it's all over now. Let's drive together to the nearest gas station or cafe. And there you stop and call your husband," the girl cried even harder. "I'm sure if you talk, everything will be all right." "It won't," she shook her head. "Everything will never be all right. He cheated on me." "Look, girl, what's your name?" "Shanna," she sobbed. "Shanna, we can't just stand in the middle of the road like this. And I can't let you go alone like this. So wipe your tears. There's a cafe about 1 kilometer away. You're following me. Take your time and please watch the road." The girl nodded her head in agreement. Scene returned to the car. He was sorry for the situation. Most likely he wouldn't be able to catch Allison at home, but he couldn't leave this girl like this. They stopped at a cafe, and Scene got out of the car again. "Would you like some coffee?" he asked. The girl shook her head negatively. "I don't want any. I don't want anything," she cried. "Come on." Scene literally forcibly dragged her out of the car. "So Shanna, do you have anyone you can call to come get you?" "I don't know, relatives, parents." Yes, she said. Okay, we'll have coffee and wait for someone to come get you. Scene led the girl into the cafe. And there's no need to be so upset, he asked her. Maybe things will still change. For example, I believe in true love. And if your husband is your soulmate, then you will definitely reconcile. And if not, you'll soon meet your true destiny. You're so amazing, the girl said. I've never met a man who was so open about his feelings. Are you married? And you must be very happy? That's right. My wife and I are very much in love. And I believe that everyone should have the kind of love that I have. Shanna, you're gonna be very happy. I'm sure of it. Well, I'm not. Shanna smiled sadly. You know, thank you so much for stopping and talking to me. I feel better now. I'll wait for my parents and we'll go home together. I don't think my husband and I are gonna make it. It's been bad for a long time. But thanks to you, I believe that happiness is still possible for me. Not right now, later, but there is still a chance. You will be happy, Scene assured her. You go, they're waiting for you. Your wife must be worried. Go, I'll really be all right. Good luck, Shanna. Scene said goodbye to the girl and drove home. Now he could take his time. Allison had already left for work. They wouldn't see each other until the evening. Scene pulled up to the house, took his bag out of the car, and went up to his floor. He took his keys out of his pocket and tried to put them in the keyhole. But the key didn't fit the lock. At first, Scene thought he was imagining things. But no, the keyhole was completely different. He had a long stem key in his hands, and the keyhole was suitable for a flat key. Scene looked around carefully. The floor was his and the apartment was his. They had lived here since their first day together. Scene couldn't be confused, so his wife changed the locks. But why? And why didn't she say anything? Scene shrugged. Maybe she'd just forgotten to tell him. He dialed Allison's number. She didn't answer for a long time. He was starting to worry. You shouldn't, replied his father sharply. You've never taken our word for it. But your brother's been in prison for almost 2 years. He just hasn't been able to write or call anyone. Edgar's in jail? Scene was very surprised. And you couldn't get him off? His father looked away. I couldn't, he admitted muffledly. They were picked up right at the scene of the crime. Another theft? Scene guessed. How long is he in jail for? Longer, Fiona replied, and this time it wasn't just theft. The woman was almost crying, but bodily harm. But it wasn't his fault. He was framed. He didn't hit that man. It's never his fault, Scene said mockingly. Well, I'll be off then. Thank you for the tea and for the conversation, and most importantly for stopping meddling in my personal life. It's what you wanted, Fiona said. I still do, Scene countered. After you offered to do time for your beloved Edgar, I'd rather not have anything to do with you. We meant well, Dad replied. If Edgar hadn't gone to jail the first time, he'd be a completely different man now, I'm sure of it. And who I would be is of no concern to you at all, Scene concluded. You're stronger than Edgar, Alex said. You would have been able to handle all the hardships of prison. And I still think you should have gone in his place. It would have shown that you loved your brother and that you cared about us. Scene was very angry with himself. Why had he gone to his parents? What had he hoped to hear? That they were remorseful, that they loved him as much as Edgar, that they'd suddenly have a conscience and everything would change. Everything he'd learned from them, they could have discussed over the phone. There was no need to come here. He had decided to leave and break off all relations with his family for a reason. Now he was just convinced for the 100th time that it was the right decision. What to do next, Scene didn't know. Here he had not found out anything. Where to look for his wife also had no idea. He had lost his spirit. He thought Allison was his soulmate. He thought they were inseparable. But it was so shaky that a few words from a stranger were enough to make it all fall apart. But still, who could have talked to Allison? Scene dialed his wife's number out of habit and wasn't surprised when the phone was disconnected. He stopped in front of the hotel and thought, should he leave tonight or spend the night here and come home tomorrow? He decided he shouldn't go at night. Scene climbed the stairs, went inside and went to the elevator. He suddenly thought he saw Allison. Scene shook his head and smiled sadly. It's about time. He was starting to see her everywhere. He looked again. Suddenly he realized he hadn't imagined it. It was really Allison. But how? How? Why? What was she doing here? Scene followed his wife, but when he turned into the corridor where Allison had disappeared earlier, There was no one there. Scene scrutinized the long corridor, but it was impossible to guess behind which of the many doors his wife was hiding. The man hurried to the reception. "Young lady, hello," he addressed the receptionist. "I need to know what room the guest is staying in." "Sorry, we do not give such information," replied the girl. "But if you want, we can give you a note or a gift." "Thank you, but that's not necessary. But you can at least say whether there is such a guest in your hotel or not." "I can't either," she smiled. "I have no right." Scene went back to his room. As unbelievable as the encounter seemed, Scene knew for sure it was Allison. The most important thing was that she didn't move out of here tonight, but she didn't seem to notice him, so she's in no hurry. He'll get up early tomorrow and watch her in the hotel lobby. He's got no other option. He finally got lucky this morning. He hadn't been in the lobby 20 minutes when he saw Allison. She was obviously in a hurry. "It's good to see you at last," Scene said as he stood in front of her. The girl flinched in surprise and froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I never thought I'd see you here." "Likewise," Scene replied. "Why don't you explain? What brings you here?" "It's my family, isn't it? They must have said something to you. And yesterday I almost believed they had nothing to do with it." "Depends on who you mean," Allison said. "If you're talking about your parents who you've been hiding from me for years for reasons I don't understand, then no, they haven't contacted me, and I don't know them." "Then who has contacted you?" "My brother." "You have a brother?" Allison was surprised in turn. "Scene, what do you want? We've been married for 5 years, known each other for even longer, and I'm just now finding out you have a brother. Your life before you met me was a complete mystery to me. And how can you really know a person if you don't know their history?" "There's nothing to know," Sean replied. "Allison, I'm not hiding anything from you. Sure, I've asked you 1,000 times to tell me about your family, and you've always changed the subject. That's because I'm ashamed. Ashamed of my parents. I'm ashamed of a lot of things I've done. I don't want to remember my past. Yesterday, I saw my parents for the first time in years, and you know what I realized? I wish we hadn't met them." Allison only looked at her husband in silence. "If it's so important to you, I'll tell you," he surrendered. "I'll tell you every detail. Just tell me what's going on between us." "I have to go," Allison replied. "I'm in a hurry. Let's talk later." "Oh no, I heard that before. You refused to talk at first, and then you just disappeared. What was that all about? And why are you in such a hurry to rent our apartment?" "If you're in a hurry, I'll go with you." The girl sighed. "I'll give you my word of honor that I'll be back in a couple of hours. We'll sit down and talk about everything, especially since I need your help. I hope you won't say no." "And some help? Unbelievable. Help with what?" "Help me get a quickie divorce." "Maybe," Allison said. "And there's no need to yell at me. After all, I'm here to fix your mistakes." "My mistakes?" he interjected. "What mistakes?" "I'll be back," Allison replied, "and we'll talk about it." Scene nodded sullenly. He suddenly felt a great fatigue come over him. He didn't care. It wasn't how he'd imagined meeting his beloved wife, and he'd never thought Allison would be so distrustful of him. The words of a stranger had changed their lives instantly. Besides, what could they possibly have told her? Didn't like her brother? Didn't go along with her parents? What did he do? It's obvious Allison doesn't love him, so it doesn't make sense. She's made it clear she wants a quickie divorce, so he'd give her a divorce. Scene was pretty sure his wife was gonna run away again, but a few hours later, she called and invited him to her room. "I think it's better to talk here," Allison remarked. "There are too many people in the cafe." "I don't care," Scene replied. "The important thing is that you explain to me why all this is happening. I'll answer all your questions and explain everything, but..." The girl lowered her eyes. "From what I see, after I tell you everything, we'll have a big fight. And I'm afraid my questions will remain unanswered." "That's okay," Scene shrugged. "I live with unanswered questions." Scene. Allison looked at her husband softly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have left like that. I just wanted to see everything with my own eyes. And I really need to know as much as I can about your past." "Okay," Scene sank into a chair. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Allison answered immediately. "I was born into a military family and a teacher," Scene began his story. "When I was very young, my parents moved around a lot, but by the time I went to school, we had settled here. Mom's a history teacher." has a weakness for pretty names and various historical figures. Besides, her name's Fiona, and she's decided her children's names should start with that letter. In general, we lived as an ordinary family as it seemed to me. My friend's parents were strict, and I got a lot of abuse from my parents. I thought it was just the way things were. Many of my friends had older siblings, and when my parents informed me that there would soon be a second child in the family, I was excited. But Edgar's birth changed everything. I wasn't remembered very often, and now I wasn't needed at all. You'll say it's childish jealousy. Believe me, it's not. In high school and college, I tried my best to do something my parents would be proud of, but it was like I didn't even exist. The only time they remembered me was when they had to get Edgar out of a jam. Believe me, I'm not proud of my behavior during those years. I should have been smarter, wiser. Just stepped aside and let them live their lives. But my parents were great at manipulating me. They would pull me closer and then push me away again. Eventually, Edgar started stealing. He was unlucky enough to get caught on a regular basis. As long as the thefts were small, Dad was able to get him off. But then he got arrested for grand larceny and Dad was powerless. So my parents suggested that I take the blame in due time for my brother. Allison looked at her husband with wide open eyes. "I think I'm beginning to understand you," she whispered. "And then what happened?" "Nothing. I packed up and left. I didn't talk to my parents anymore, and I'm here now because I thought they were the reason for your strange behavior." "No, it wasn't them," Allison shrugged. "So are you going to explain to me what's going on and why you came here?" "Scene. I understand that you don't have the best relationship with your parents. I can even understand your hesitation about having kids or not. I can kind of understand why you left your kids, but do you really think your cheating is okay?" "What cheating?" asked a shocked Scene. "What kids? I don't get it." "Allison, I've never cheated on you." "Yeah, right. Well, ex-girlfriend doesn't count. What does that have to do with this? And what ex?" "Sean," the girl looked at her husband. "I know you're a great actor, but would you stop? Let's assume for a minute that I'm not acting and I really don't understand what this is about. Why don't you explain it to me?" "Well, if you prefer it this way, here, look." Allison held out her phone to him. Scene was looking at a sad-looking boy in the picture on the screen of the phone. He looked to be about 2 years old, maybe a little older. "Take it." Allison held it out. "Look, there are a lot of pictures." Scene didn't mind. He picked up the phone and flipped through the gallery. It looked like Allison had taken the pictures herself. There were dozens of pictures of the boy. Scene had no trouble noticing that the boy looked just like him. This kid is probably a relative of his. "Who is it?" he finally asked. "Whose child is this?" "Your son," Allison answered him. "Don't you recognize him? You've probably only seen him a few times." "Allison, look, this kid is probably a relative of mine, but that's not my son. I'm actually seeing him for the first time. Can you please explain to me why you're so sure I'm his father? Why don't you have any doubts about it?" The girl looked at Scene carefully. "Now there is," she replied. "You couldn't have played it all out like that. When was the last time you saw your ex-girlfriend?" "Which one?" "We're probably talking about Maddie. I saw her the day I told her I had to go away for a while. We had a big fight, broke up immediately. I decided there was nothing left to keep me here, so I left. I never saw her again. If you remember, she wrote to me a few years ago. That was our only contact, so to speak." "Did she contact you?" "She did," Allison admitted. "Said she tried to call you, but since you're ignoring her, she's going to tell me. So, Maddie sent you a picture of the boy, that's it. You believe he's my son?" "I mean, he looks like me, but how many kids look like me?" "I'm sorry." Allison got up and went to her bag. She pulled out another photo, a much older one, and held it out to her husband. "How do you explain this one?" Scene took the photo from Allison. He studied it for a long moment, then brought it closer to the phone screen. Allison kept her eyes on her husband's face, trying to read every emotion that was reflected on his face. At first, he seemed uncomprehending. Then a look of extreme interest came over his face. Allison thought that at some point he would feel guilty, but no, she saw no hint of guilt. Finally, Scene looked up at his wife. "Very similar," he commented, and the photos were taken in the same place. The photos Scene held in his hands and the one on Allison's phone both showed the boys. Even though the difference between the photos was more than 20 years, It was easy to tell that they had been taken in the same place, and Scene even knew the place perfectly well. The photos were taken in his parents' apartment. The boys in the pictures were about a year old, and they looked remarkably similar. Same eyes, same ears, even the shape of their noses were the same. "What do you say now?" Allison asked. "The photo in the phone was sent to me by your ex, and the second photo, well, I think you know where I got it. It was in our family album. Are you going to keep saying that this boy is not your son?" Cian looked at the girl absent-mindedly. "Yes," he said. "After a long silence, I really needed to tell you. So you're finally ready to confess?" Allison asked. "But why? Why did you keep it from me? If you were better off just telling her, I'd let you go." "God, that's not what I meant," Sean replied. "I should have told you about my parents from the beginning, about my relationship with them, about everything really." "You should have." She nodded her head in agreement. "But what does that have to do with now? What's the connection between the fact that you cheated on me and your relationship with your parents?" "I didn't cheat on you," Scene answered. "This," he held out a photo to his wife, "is not me. That's Edgar." "Edgar?" she muttered. "But why do you have this picture?" "Allison, he's my brother. Why can't I have a picture of him? I honestly don't even remember where I got it from. I just grabbed it with some other papers, I guess." "Wait, so Maddie sent you a picture of this boy, said he was my son. You remembered the picture, saw that we looked alike, and kicked me out of the apartment?" That sounds stupid," Allison nodded. "But that's pretty much what happened. I mean, come on, Maddie's your ex-girlfriend. The kid looks just like you at that age. By the way, he basically looks like you. Your eyes, your smile. And I didn't know you had a brother. So, Maddie and your brother?" "I have no idea. But you've been to Maddie's, right? Talked to her?" Scene asked. "No, I didn't see her," Allison replied. "But the pictures of the boy in your phone, I thought you took them." "I did," Allison confirmed. "I've seen the boy more than once, but I haven't seen Maddie." "Now I don't get it at all," Scene replied. "Maddie texted me first. She sent me pictures. Then we called, just before you returned from your business trip. She told me that you'd been visiting all this time. And she gave me so many details, so many little details, that I believed her." "Allison, but I was on a business trip this time too, so why wasn't I at her place?" "That was the hardest part of the story," Allison sighed. "Anyway, the first thing she texted me was that she was looking for you. She was persistent, sending several messages a day. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and asked her what she wanted from you. Maddie replied that you'd been missing for months, not returning her calls, and that she didn't care about you, but needed money for the kids. Said she couldn't handle two." "Wait, what two?" "Just like that, two. Maddie has 2 kids. She left the youngest one in an orphanage. His name is Gary. Maddie says she couldn't raise him. She didn't have the capacity. The older one is easier, and she'll keep him for now. But if you don't show up, she'll put the older one in an orphanage." Scene was silent for a long time. "It's getting worse by the hour," he muttered finally. "What a story. Maddie's a freak. And what, she actually left the boy in an orphanage?" "She did," Allison nodded. "I've been to see him a few times. And this morning I had a meeting with the director of the orphanage. I wanted to find out how I could pick up the boy." "Allison," Scene stretched out. "Are you out of your mind?" "I thought he was your son," Allison replied simply. "I thought he was your son," Allison replied simply. "God, you've made a mess of things. You almost drove me crazy." "Are you mad?" the girl asked. "Honestly, I am," Scene sighed. "I know it's a complicated story. And Maddie is not stupid. She knows how to navigate the situation and make the most of it. And I'm sure my parents had a lot of help, but you should have talked to me first. And you certainly shouldn't have kicked me out of the apartment. I was afraid that if I saw you, I'd forget why I was mad and forgive you. And I didn't want to forgive you because I thought you cheated on me and abandoned your kids." "What are we going to do now?" the girl asked timidly. But Scene didn't seem to hear her. "Wait, you said there are 2 children. How old is the oldest child?" 6, Allison answered. "God," she looked at her husband in shock. "So he could be." Scene shook his head. No," he muttered. "She would have told me. She would have told me." Scene, "But you were still living here then. Does that mean that Maddie was having an affair with your brother before you left?" "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. But you've seen their relationship," Allison said. Did they have any contact at all? Were they friends? I didn't think so. I thought they couldn't stand each other at all. I don't get it. Maybe they're not Edgar's kids. Or, I need to talk to Maddie. Allison shook her head. I called her several times. She's not picking up. Well, she was trying to reach me, Steen said. I'm supposed to get an answer. Can I have her number? Sure. Allison handed her husband her cell phone with Maddie's number written in it. Steen dialed the numbers and pressed the call. He waited for quite a while, but no one picked up. Do you have pictures of the older child? He turned back to his wife. Did she send them to you? Yes, Allison replied, but only two. She handed the phone back to Steen. Steen stared at the pictures for a long time. It's hard to tell. He finally handed the phone back to her. Let's go. Where to? She was surprised. To my parents. Since Maddie's not answering, we'll have to ask them. Maybe we can find out where Maddie is. Okay, she nodded, following Steen. Are you sure I won't get in your way? Steen turned to his wife. Allison, you and I have a problem right now. You've hurt me a lot, and I don't know how we're gonna deal with it yet. But you're still my wife, and I'm not gonna divorce you. Unless, of course, you don't want me to. No, she answered hastily. I don't want a divorce. I'm so embarrassed, Steen. I don't even know what drove me to do it. It was probably resentment. I couldn't think about anything else but the fact that you cheated on me. I'm sorry, she asked. We'll talk about this later. All I wanted to say now is that you are my lawfully wedded wife. So please stop acting like a huddled, scared little mouse. We're going to my parents' house. Honestly, after last night's meeting, my only dream is to never see them again. So I really need your support. Allison, you've seen the boy. You've talked to Maddie. In short, you know more than I do. So please don't be silent. Help me get the parents to tell the truth. Also, Steen looked at his wife carefully. There's something else we need to discuss. If the older boy is still my son, I didn't cheat on you. Everything happened before we met. The girl nodded her head. I understand, she said. And how do you feel about it? Steen asked. Allison shrugged her shoulders. It's hard to say. A baby is always a good thing. That's why I'd be happy for you. That's it. Well, the girl shook her head. It's not nice to find out like this, but it's not your fault. So if Maddie's eldest son is for me, you'll be fine? Yes, Steen, I promise. And I'd love it if you wanted to hang out with the boy and have him come visit us from time to time. Yeah, not even occasionally. If he came to live with us all the time, I'd be fine with that too. But if it's not your kid, it'll be a lot easier on all of us, Steen finished Allison's thought. I'm sorry, but yeah, don't apologize. I get it. It's gonna be really hard with Maddie. She's already blackmailing me with a baby, and I'm sure she'll continue to do so. Let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. It was important for me to realize that you wouldn't run away from me again if I found out I had a son. Fiona opened the door this time. You've been coming around a lot, she greeted her son. Come to blame us for all your problems again. She only just noticed Allison. Ooh, and this time there's more than one. This is Allison, my wife. Steen introduced her. We just have a few questions for you. The sooner you tell us the truth, the sooner we can leave. This is the first time we've seen your wife. Your father came out into the hallway. You still haven't given up on those conspiracy theories. I already have, Steen replied. We're going to talk about something else now. Where's Maddie? Maddie? Mom interrupted. What do you need her for? I could tell the woman was worried. I want to talk to her. She called Allison, wanting to talk to me, and I'm ready. That little shit. Alex resented her. I told her to stay away from you. So you knew she wanted to contact me. But why? And what's this story with the kids? Whose kids are they anyway? They're our grandchildren. And your nephews. Edgar's kids. He went to prison. And naturally, Maddie was running out of money. She wanted us to come to you for help. We told her not to contact you. We know full well that you don't want anything to do with us. And we can handle the grandchildren on our own. But I guess she didn't listen to us. Where is she now? She's gone to her mom's in the country. There's no communication there. She should be back tomorrow. That's it. That's the first time Allison's ever spoken. You say that so calmly. She's gone to the country. She'll be back tomorrow. What about your little grandson? Gary's in an orphanage now. He's crying, calling for his mommy, sad and bored. Alex smirked. And you and my son fit together. He's just as mumbly. What's going to happen to him, Gary? Maddie didn't give up the baby. She left him there for a while. We visit him. He'll be fine. Besides, a man has to be used to hardship from a young age to grow up to be a real man. But this is your favorite Edgar's son, your grandson, Sean reminded him. He noticed how pale his mother had turned. Apparently, she was worried about the child, but she couldn't go against her husband and her. And by the way, who is Maddie to his mother? Are Edgar and Maddie married? Sean asked. Do the children carry your last name? No, Fawn replied. Edgar's in trouble with the law, and he's always down on his luck. And he didn't want to ruin things for the kids and Maddie. He didn't want his reputation to affect them. Of course he did, the son muttered. He didn't want the responsibility. Okay, so Maddie would be here tomorrow. Why did she leave the youngest child at the orphanage and not the oldest? It's obvious that you don't have children, the mother replied. A small child requires more attention, and she has to work. Aha, I don't see her working, Sean said. Well, I hope I get a chance to talk to her tomorrow. I only have a few more questions for you. What's the older boy's name? Jack, Alex answered. Here's a question about Jack. Are you sure this is Edgar's child? Sean looked at his mother. She was worse than his father at hiding her feelings. And as soon as he asked that question, he realized that she doubted it too. She doesn't know the answer. Edgar never had any doubt that Jack was his son. He asked us to have no doubts, and we? Okay, Sean interrupted his mother. You did what you always do. You honored your favorite son's request. Okay, he waved his hand. I hope my cell phone hasn't been deleted. Tell Maddie I'm looking for her. I really want to talk to her. Wait, Sean's father called out to him. Are you gonna find out if Jack is your son or not? Yes, Sean confirmed. I'm going to. Why? If it turns out that he is yours, Alex replied, then I'll talk to Maddie about giving the boy to you. Edgar's getting out of prison soon. He needs a family and other people's kids. Sean heard Allison gasp quietly next to him. The girl reached out and squeezed his palm. Yes, Dad, I understand, Sean replied without taking his eyes off the older man's face. Edgar has to have the perfect life, and you're going to try your best to create it, even though he will once again completely fail to appreciate it. The next day, Maddie called and then came to the hotel to see Sean herself. Your wife is crazy, she informed him, taking a seat in the chair across from Sean. When I called her, I didn't expect it to have this effect. I was just trying to piss you two off, and I was hoping you'd give me some money. And Maddie smirked. You two aren't getting a divorce, are you? None of your business. We'll deal with Allison on our own, Sean replied. But unlike you, she's a kind and sympathetic girl. She cares about your kids more than you do. I don't care, Maddie replied. Will you give me the money? Jack, is he Edgar's son or mine? Sean didn't beat around the bush. Maddie grinned and shrugged. I have no idea, she replied. I've never done an appraisal. I just convinced Edgar that it was his baby. He was so proud to beat you once again that he forgot to even ask for confirmation. When did your relationship with Edgar begin? I was still here, wasn't I? Of course, Maddie grinned. We liked going out behind your back. It was fun. Back then, I thought I loved him a lot more than I loved you. He made me feel good. I found out I was pregnant just before you left. I was just starting to think about which one of you to tell first. And then you and your announcement that you were leaving. I was so excited. I thought all my problems were solved. Why? Sean was surprised. It wasn't, was it? Your brother is hard to live with. If I had stayed with you, the girl would have stopped talking. What to say now? It turned out the way it did. I want us to run a DNA test on Jack. We need to put this thing behind us once and for all. And if I don't agree? Maddie smirked. It's my baby and I may not consent. You can, the man agreed. Except, no test, no money. And if Jack's my son, I'll help you. Or are you saying no because you did the DNA and you know for sure it's not my kid? Okay, let's do the stupid test, Maddie agreed after some hesitation. But maybe you could throw in some money. I can't even make it. We have nothing to eat. Sean looked at the girl with contempt. Have you tried to work? He asked. Do not interfere in my life with stupid advice. I'll figure out whether I should work or not. Okay, Sean handed Maddie some bills. I'll call you tonight. I'll tell you where we're meeting tomorrow. And you know there's no second chances. If you don't show up, then I think Jack is my brother's son. Mady stared at the money in her hands for a few minutes, thinking. All right, she said at last. You don't have to spend it. Here, she handed him a piece of paper. I made it 6 years ago. Jack is Edgar's son. Scene scrutinized the contents of the document. Thank you. He handed the document back to Maddie. Then we have nothing more to talk about. I hope we won't see each other again. Wait, Maddie exclaimed as Scene rose from the table. And you don't care that your nephew is in an orphanage? I do, Scene admitted. But I know exactly what will happen if I interfere. You'll use the boy to get money out of me. That won't make me happy, or most importantly him. So he spread his hands. You can take it from here, without me. Oh, and by the way, if any of you try to contact my wife again, I'll go to the police. I'll tell them you're threatening me. I hope that's clear. I am, Maddie snorted. You've changed, and not for the better. Apparently your wife is all softness and humanity now, and you've become. Maddie was silent for a moment. Just like us, she finally finished. Maybe, Scene didn't disagree, but I still won't help you. Scene returned to the room where a worried Allison was waiting for him. Did you talk? She asked. We did. Scene nodded. We're leaving tomorrow morning. What about the forensics? Allison asked. Maddie had already done the forensics back when Jack was born. He's Edgar's son. I've seen the papers. She just showed them to you. The wife was surprised. I gave her the money, Scene admitted. I made it clear that it was the only money she'd ever get from me. She must have realized I was serious, and she showed me the papers. I see, the girl stretched out. It seemed to Scene that his wife was even upset that Jack was not his son, so we're free to go home tomorrow. What about Gary? Allison asked, confused. Allison, let's talk, Scene suggested. What's going on? You, of course, have always been a girl sympathetic and soft, but this whole situation isn't really like you. What's the matter? Simple. Allison shrugged. He's a good boy. I feel sorry for him, and I feel like they don't need him at all. Scene covered his eyes. He just refused to believe what was happening. Allison, I wasn't asking about this particular kid. I was asking about the whole situation. Okay, well, let's talk about Gary first. You've already checked into his adoption. What did they tell you? That Maddie hadn't given him up, and therefore no one but Maddie could take him. Scene spread his hands. Then what was the conversation about? He asked. They don't want him, Allison replied. Allison, I feel sorry for my nephew too, and I wish I could help him. But let's just say we're trying to take him away. What do you think Maddie would do? I get it. I get that it's almost impossible. She'll start blackmailing us. She'll start pulling money out of us. And then she probably won't give up the baby. Because once we have Jack, she and your brother will have no further leverage over you. Exactly, Scene nodded. You know that. I do. I just feel sorry for the boy. I just feel sorry for the boy. What's that? The man asked. No, nothing. Allison dismissed it. You said we could go home tomorrow, but where are we going to go? I've rented out our apartment. She kept her head down. Allison, so you're not going to tell me what's going on with you? The girl shrugged. Not yet. I don't understand everything. Give me a few more days and then we'll talk, okay? Well, okay, Sting answered. And about the apartment? I talked to the chief yesterday. He is not happy that I am long gone. He says I have to go on a business trip again. Allison looked at her husband, almost frightened. Are you going away? She asked hastily. As soon as we get back to the city. The bosses are asking, or rather demanding, Singh answered. So I was wondering, maybe I should quit? Allison looked at her husband in surprise. Quit? I thought you loved your job. I used to, but now, with this boss coming in, I'm liking it less and less. So I thought, the apartment's rented, I won't have a job. You can't stand your job either. There's nothing to keep us in this town. Why don't we go somewhere else and make a fresh start? Allison looked at her husband shyly. With me? Allison, we've been over this. Thank you for not being disappointed in me and for giving me a second chance. I know I'm a mess. I don't know what's going on, but right now it seems to me like you had some other reason to do this besides the ones you gave me. I hope one day you'll tell me everything. In the meantime, let's forget about this and think about where we can move to. What should we do, a big city or a smaller town? Allison and Sean returned home. For now, They checked into the apartment where Scene lived. They needed a few more days to quit their jobs, finalize things, and pack. They still hadn't decided where they were going to go. Scene offered Allison to choose a city to look for a rented apartment, but the girl only replied that there was still time. About a week later, Scene came home and found his wife looking at houses in the remote village. "You want to move there?" he wondered. "But where would we work?" Allison shook her head. "I thought about moving," she admitted, "but not for the two of us. I know you dream more of the big city and—" "Do you want to live in the country?" Scene asked. "No." Allison shook her head. "Not that I really want to, it's just, I don't think it's a bad house. And it's cheap to rent, and life is cheaper in the country. I could live there. And there's a job. They're looking for a kindergarten teacher." "So good. I see that you have decided everything again, and most importantly, again everything without me." "No," she shook her head. "Those are just options. I'm not running away or doing anything else until I talk to you." "Simple." The girl waved her hands. "Let's look at how we used to live, and how we live now." "Come on," Scene agreed. "I thought we were happy." "Are you sure?" Allison asked. "No, of course. When we first met, in the first few years we were married, we were very happy. And the last year—" "The last year what?" Scene asked. "Yeah, maybe it hasn't been the best, but was there something missing?" "I love you so much, Allison. And I love you. But let's be honest. You haven't been on so many business trips before, and you've been sent on so many trips with your consent. All this year, I've been waiting for you. You come home for a week and then disappear again for a month. Now you want to quit, but back then you were avoiding me." "Allison, What?" Allison asked. "Am I wrong? Ever since we went to the clinic to get checked out and it turned out that I was the reason." "Allison, that's not why I've been avoiding you." "Well, that's exactly why. But I don't blame you for anything. I mean, you can't have a baby yet. That's fine. It seems to me that you're driving yourself crazy, racking yourself with guilt and fear. And yeah, I'm good too." Scene nodded his head. "I'm not gonna make excuses. You were so upset the whole time, and I figured the less you saw of me, the easier it would be for us. And what can I say? The atmosphere in our house wasn't easy. And so you go away, and then you come, you're glad to see me. I'm glad. Everything seems to be fine." The girl nodded. "That's why I reacted so keenly to the messages from Maddie. Naturally, I should have talked to you. But you have kids out there, and more than one." Allison waved her hands. "And I can't give you a baby, so she's better than me." "Allison, I don't have kids with Maddie," Sean reminded her. "I know, I really didn't think so at the time. And then when you thought Jack was your son, I saw the way your eyes lit up. And I saw how upset you were when you realized he wasn't yours. Sean, we love each other, but we're not happy together. So I thought, since you're starting over, maybe you should do it alone. You start a new life wherever you want, and I'll go somewhere else. Maybe we'll be happy separately." Scene looked at his wife carefully. "What do you want?" he asked. "Why do you always think about others? Why do you always put your own desires first?" "It matters what I want, Maddie, the kids. But what do you really want?" No buts," Sean replied. "That's enough. We'll do whatever you want. You want to get divorced? We'll get divorced. If you want to stay together, then—" He smiled. "We'll be together." He kissed his wife on the nose. "I love you. And I want you to learn to appreciate yourself." Scene, Allison sat down next to her husband. "I've been thinking. I don't want a divorce. But I want your opinion on this too. Do you really want to live with me? If I can't have a baby?" "So what?" The man shrugged. "If you can't, then we'll take one from the orphanage. It's just that after you refused to adopt your nephew, I thought—" "Allison, I feel sorry for the boy too," Scene replied. "Even though I've never even met him, I'm truly sure that neither you, nor me, nor, most importantly, the child, will do any good." Allison nodded her head in agreement. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." "Allison, why is it that way? Why are you always apologizing, adjusting?" Allison shrugged and replied, "I don't know, a habit, I guess. It's been that way since I was a kid. Don't forget that I grew up with a brother too. I was in a similar situation to yours. No, my parents are certainly not your parents. They didn't emphasize my brother that much. But he's a boy. I'm a girl. He got more attention. They were more worried about him. I was quiet, studious, and he fell into bad company early on. And at school, my parents made me look after him just to keep an eye on him. I was kind of caught between two fires and always guilty. Either he noticed me and scolded me, or I failed to follow him and my parents scolded me. It was useless to justify myself. I got used to the easiest way to apologize right away. For the last year, I didn't even try to follow him. I just went to my parents and listened to their reproaches. But thank God, things got better after that. They're so close now. And my brother is doing well, you know, the girl smiled. He is, by the way. You never told me that either, Seam remarked. Allison nodded. You're right about that, she replied. I thought the past was important, that it would help me get to know you better. And now I realize that's just silly. What matters is who you are now, not what you were in the past. Sean, you said to think about what I want. I did. And it's not just about you and me. Ooh, that's new. I'd love to hear it. I don't want to move to another city, and I've rented our apartment for a while, just for a month. Also, I know you and I have plenty of money set aside. Let's sell this apartment and get a bigger one. That's not a bad suggestion, Sean agreed. We really need the apartment, but I already quit my job. You didn't like it, Allison reminded me, and I quit. Let's find another job, one that we like. I like this town. We already know everyone here. And I found a good doctor. Well, that's a good reason, Sean agreed. Then we stay here and start looking for a new job. We can put the apartment up for sale in advance too. Do you think the tenants will let us take pictures? The realtor took pictures before the lease. Let's call him. I don't like your realtor. He's slippery. Let me guess, the whole reason he's a man? Allison asked with a laugh. That too. Allison, Sean suddenly became very serious. Promise me something. If you ever feel unhappy around me again, just tell me right away. Let's not bring it to a situation like this again. I agree, Allison nodded. So I'm calling the realtor? Yes, but we'll meet him together. Allison could only marvel at how life had changed since that day. It was like the universe was letting them know they'd done the right thing. Both Allison and Sean quickly found jobs. They sold the apartment almost immediately. Immediately, they found and bought a new apartment. It required renovation, but it even pleased the couple. Both of them were happy to plunge into the worries about the arrangement of their home. And also they were lucky, and now they worked literally in a stop from each other. So to work and from work they traveled together. Relationships also qualitatively changed for the better. Of course, Allison would occasionally forget and start apologizing to Sean for everything. But her husband quickly stopped her. Saturday morning, Sean woke up alone. He went into the kitchen and found Allison finishing her breakfast. Why are you up so early? He asked. You didn't wake me up. Allison kissed her husband on the nose. I wanted you to sleep a little longer. I'm going to the clinic, remember? I'm coming with you, he answered immediately. Allison giggled and rolled her eyes. Seeing, she bowed her head. The couch will be here in 2 hours. Did you forget? I forgot, he replied. But don't get upset. The girl interrupted him. I'm going for a routine appointment. The doctor will just tell me how my condition is, whether something has improved since I was treated or not. That's quite an appointment. Call me as soon as you get out of the doctor's office. And don't get upset if the results aren't good. Allison nodded. I promise, she replied. Sean stayed behind to wait for the couch, and Allison left for the clinic. About 2 hours later, she called him and told him in a cheerful voice that the tests were excellent. The couch was here, Sean reported back. Are you going home? Yes, Allison replied. I'm just going to stop at the candy store for some brownies, and then I'll be right home. I'm waiting, her husband replied. Allison smiled happily, put the phone in her bag and went down the steps of the clinic. It was warm outside, and the girl took a deep breath with pleasure. She thought about the fact that they still needed to find a dresser and curtains for the bedroom. But today they could give themselves a day of rest. They already had a lot to do. Their apartment finally felt like a cozy family nest, and they could celebrate. The doctor said she was fine now, and nothing should interfere with the pregnancy. On Monday, Allison looked outside reluctantly. We got to work early, she declared to Sean. The weather's lovely. It's been such a great weekend. I don't feel like going to work. Let's have lunch together, her husband suggested. It would make the time go by faster. Allison nodded her head. I'd agree. But in the morning, Scene realized that his plans for lunch with his wife were unlikely to come true. Everything seemed out of control today. The plans changed lightning fast. He called Allison, warned her about canceling the lunch together. But by noon, everything had calmed down, as if Providence had finally taken mercy on Scene and his colleagues. At lunchtime, he left the office and walked toward the cafe where he and Allison usually met. He decided to dial his spouse's phone number. If she was free, they would still have time to meet. Scene, suddenly he heard a voice behind him. Scene turned around and saw a pretty girl rushing towards him. You probably don't remember me, she started. No, Scene answered. I remember you perfectly. You're Shanna. You and I were almost in a car accident once. Yes, that's me, Shanna replied. I'm so glad I ran into you. I was so sorry I didn't have your phone number. I really need to talk to you. This won't take long. Why don't we grab a coffee or? Scene was curious to see how things were going with the girl himself. Allison's not expecting him, so why not say yes? All right, let's go, he replied. Great, my favorite cafe is right next door. Do you work anywhere near here? Shanna wondered. I've never seen you before. Is that surprising? Actually, it's not surprising at all, replied Scene. I've only been working here for a short time, just a few weeks. How are you doing? I'm good. Of course, I'd had a difficult time, Shanna began. My divorce was really hard on me. Plus my ex-husband, the girl shuddered. To be honest, I never realized he was so petty. The divorce was really hard. We shared everything down to the spoons. But now, thankfully, it's over. The first time after the divorce, I was just glad it was over. And now it's good. Now I've learned to enjoy my freedom. That no one cheats on me, no one hurts me. All in all, it's all good. I'm very happy for you, Scene smiled. Allison entered the cafe with two colleagues. Have you really never been here before? Anna asked her. This place has the best food in town. No, Allison replied. It's my first time here. Wow, Victoria suddenly grabbed Allison's hand. That's your husband? The girl followed her co-worker's hand. Yes, she nodded with a slight smile. That's Scene. And he's with the girl, Anna informed the obvious. I see, Allison nodded. Let's sit somewhere far away so he won't be distracted. What do you mean distract him? Victoria didn't understand. It's probably a mistress. Or he's having a business lunch and we're interrupting, Allison suggested. Even if it is a business meeting, she's beautiful and smiling at him. Allison just shrugged silently. Come on, Anna called out. I found a great table. We'll see everything, and they won't notice us. Allison looked at her colleagues in surprise. What did we need to see? She asked, taking a seat at the very same table. Are you crazy? Victoria exclaimed. Why are you sitting with your back to them? You won't see anything. Girls, maybe we'll come here some other time, Allison asked. Right now, let's have lunch somewhere else. No, Anna said firmly. We can't keep you here, but we're not going anywhere. If you'd rather turn a blind eye, we're gonna have to help you. He's cheating on you. He's making a fool out of you. Allison sighed heavily. Okay, she said, we'll stay here. Watch if you have nothing else to do. Only it's all for nothing. I'll come home tonight, ask him, and he'll tell me all about it, and you'll believe it. Simple as that. You better check his cell phone tonight. Try social media. See who he's texting with. I'm not gonna do any of those things, Allison replied. Life has taught me to trust the people I love. I also know that Scene loves me. We're great, and he's not cheating on me. So I'm not gonna check anything. And you check just for yourself, just to make sure, Anna insisted. Allison realized she wasn't going to change her colleagues' minds. Aha, she mumbled. I will. I'll do as you say. Fortunately, the food did turn out to be excellent, and for the time being, the co-workers left Allison alone. They continued to watch her husband, but they didn't say anything to her. And Allison didn't ask. But as soon as the meal was over, the moralizing came back again. They'd smile at each other. She flirts with him. Allison shrugged. They are pleasant to each other. They have a friendly rapport. That's enough, she asked her friends. We should get back to work. The rest of the day was quite nerve-wracking for Allison. Anna and Victoria took turns coming up to her and suggesting different ways that she could follow Scene. It even came down to a private detective. Allison had been reluctant at first, but for the last 2 hours had only nodded. I'll do whatever you say. Of course you're right. I need to check it out, she kept saying. And her friends, sensing that they were succeeding, pressed her harder and harder. Allison was literally counting the hours until the end of the day. But then the boss showed up and asked her to stay a little longer. She had another urgent assignment to complete. Allison hoped that at least the girls would go home, but they were watching her every move. Finally, Allison couldn't take it anymore. Girls, did someone cheat on you? No, wondered Anna. Should I have? It seems to me that yes. At least I would have cheated if I were your husbands. You're both looking forward to it. I'm sorry, but Sean and I are different. He's not cheating on me, and I just trust him. I'll come home, and I won't even ask him anything. I'll just tell him I saw him at the restaurant tonight. If he wants to, he'll tell me who he was with. And if he doesn't want to, he won't, and that's fine too. I hope there are no more questions. Allison walked into the apartment and immediately smelled the good smell. You late tonight? Sean looked out of the kitchen. Aha, Allison replied. The chief asked me to stay late. Are you cooking something? Yeah, he said. I thought I'd make something quick. I'll give you a hand, Allison replied. Okay, agreed her husband. I'll meet you in the kitchen. There's something I want to tell you. Allison appeared in the kitchen a few minutes later and began setting the table. I saw you today, she said, at lunch. My co-workers took me to a new cafe and you were there. Why did you come over to say hello? The husband wondered. Allison, he looked at the girl carefully. Are you jealous? Allison smiled slightly and shook her head negatively. I'm sorry, but no, she replied. I just thought you might have a business meeting and didn't want to intrude. Besides my co-workers, she waved her hand vaguely. What? That's a separate and unnecessary conversation. They've been trying to convince me all day that you're cheating on me and that I need to follow you, hire a detective, check your cell phone, and all that kind of nonsense. Need to? Sean asked. Who? Allison didn't understand. The phone is mine, Sean answered. The girl bowed her head thoughtfully. But you can give it to me, she agreed. I like one dress. I'd love to buy it with your card. Sean laughed, then pulled his wife against him. Thank you for trusting me, he replied. And by the way, my interesting story has to do with this girl. And I do not even know whether it's good that you did not approach or on the contrary. It's a pity that you did not do it. Why? Allison wondered. Remember I told you about the girl I almost ran over on the highway? Her husband had cheated on her, and she was very upset. Yeah, Allison said. I remember it well. Is that her? Yeah, we met on the street today. She saw me and she was really happy. She said she wished she'd gotten my number because she really wanted to talk to me. And since I wanted to know how she was doing, I agreed to have coffee with her. How's it going? What about your husband? Are they reconciled or divorced? Allison asked. Divorced, and Shanna said the divorce had been very hard on her, and she'd had a hard time since the divorce. But she said that she was doing fine now, that she liked living on her own. Allison smiled sadly. It was good that she was doing well, of course, but it was still sad. Sean nodded. But that's not what I wanted to tell you, he said. I drove her to the cafe that day, and we talked a little, and I told her about you, about our relationship. Although Sean smiled, everything I said at that moment was not quite true. But then I believed in the truth of my words, and one thing I was definitely not wrong about, I love you very much. Allison hugged her husband. I love you too, she said. But why are you? Shanna is a journalist. She has an assignment from the newsroom to write a big story, even a series of articles about couples in love and relationships. And today she asked permission to write about our relationship, about what I was telling her that day at the cafe. Wow, Allison was surprised. And what you told her? The truth, Sean said, that you and I, as it turns out, have a less than perfect relationship. That we kept a lot of things quiet and didn't know how to share problems with each other. That it was too early to write about us. We needed a lot of work on our relationship. Allison smiled. You're right, she said. I couldn't have found better words. But she still insists, she said. She says she'll write about what I told her then, and she'll figure out the rest on her own. Did you say yes? Allison asked. I said it was okay with me, but that I still needed to talk to you. I don't mind, Allison replied. Let her write whatever she wants. I'm sure your words are worth putting on paper. Scene smiled and kissed his wife on the temple. You know, the most valuable thing about today's meeting was your reaction. You have no idea how much your trust means to me. Allison looked at her husband with embarrassment. I didn't do anything wrong, she replied. Our relationship is created by the two of us, now really by the two of us, and in the fact that I trust you, I deserve as much credit as you do. The girl was silent. Seeing, she suddenly asked, what do you think Shanna will write the end in our story? And they lived happily ever after. Scene answered with a smile. I'm sure of it.
Hey you, can't you see where you're going? Barry stopped the car outside the store. He was a couple steps short of the grocery store. But a speeding car drove by and splashed in with muddy water from a puddle. What kind of people? With a little profanity to go along with it, Barry looked at his ruined suit and couldn't find the right words. How am I supposed to show up at City Hall looking like this? Did you happen to memorize the number? He turned to his son. What a lousy town this is. People in our town are more cultured and don't behave so brazenly on the roads. Barry tried to shake the dirt off his suit with his hand. He didn't have time. Don't worry, we'll stop at the mall and get you a new suit. We're not going back, Osborne reassured his father. It was pointless to postpone the visit to City Hall. Today they had to sign a contract for a turnkey construction project. For the sake of this contract, they have already traveled 200 kilometers. Osborne would not delay the meeting with the mayor for the sake of a dirty suit. Osborne would realize later that day. Up there, upstairs, someone wanted this fateful meeting to take place. They stopped at the nearest shopping center. They went up to the second floor and just popped into the first menswear department. A girl came up to them, a girl who looked very much like the one Osborne had lost long ago. He'd been looking for her for a long time, but Hillary had disappeared without explanation. She had simply left him, most likely for another more successful young man. Ignoring Osborne, she offered them a choice of several suits for business meetings. She took them to the fitting room, and while they were choosing, she disappeared in an unknown direction. Osborne would have rushed after her without even thinking. He watched from the side as the girl slung the strap of her handbag over her shoulder. She exchanged a few words with the cashier and hurriedly left the department, without even glancing in his direction. Isn't that her? It's so similar. The gait, the facial expressions, the smile. Osborne thought to himself, remembering their last meeting 6 years ago, when Hillary, without explanation, packed up and left without even saying goodbye. The search for her was unsuccessful. Her parents remained silent. Her friend shrugged her shoulders in surprise. There's certainly been a change in her appearance. From a shade, she has turned into a searing brunette. If earlier she practically did not make up, now there is a new makeup on her face. She looks, of course, flawless, like she doesn't even wear makeup. The girl was completely indifferent, looking at Osborne as if he were a complete stranger. Of course it looks very similar, but it was probably not her. Osborne reassured himself. When his father, already satisfied with his appearance, stood at the cash register and paid for his new suit, Osborne plucked up the courage to ask the girl a question. Tell me please, the girl who was next to you recently, isn't Hillary by any chance? That's correct, Hillary. That's our manager. She owns the store, the clerk answered with a smile. She handed Osborne the bag in which she had packed his father's dirty suit. Without wasting another moment, they exchanged pleasantries and hurried out of the store, figuring in their minds that Hillary would be here tonight to collect the proceeds. Osborne sent his father home, and at 5 p.m. he was already circling the department. When he saw Hillary, Osborne walked purposefully into the store. He decided that today nothing would stop him, and he would finally find out the reason why she had left him in the most shameless way. Hillary, hello. Don't you recognize me? Seeing her cold stare, Osborne felt a fever without a fever. From her expression, he realized that of course she recognized him, but she didn't show it. Have I changed so much that I'm hard to recognize? He heard a voice that sounded painfully familiar. You look better, he said hoarsely, confused by the surprise. It was only now that Osborne noticed a boy of about 5 years old standing beside her. He was standing next to Hillary, digging into his cell phone and paying no attention to the people around him. Son? Osborne smiled, noticing at once that the boy looked a lot like Hillary. It's obvious that he's not a daughter, she replied unfriendly. How old is he? What do you care? There is a doubt that if he does not want to say the age, it could be his child. And why not? What's your name, boy? Osborne addressed the child directly. Without taking his eyes off the phone, the boy answered, "Albert? Albert, how old are you?" "5." The child mumbled idly. "It will be soon." Hillary clarified, "Mom, have you forgotten how old your son is?" "I was already 5." He got off the phone and looked at his mother in surprise. "Where's your daddy?" "My dad left me and my mom before I was born." "Did he, Mom?" Albert looked at Hillary, waiting for her to confirm his words. Osborne choked, squatted down in front of Albert. "Maybe your mama left your daddy. Stop talking nonsense." She raised her voice. Hillary remembered the day Osborne had invited her to the movies. He was waiting for Hillary outside the theater. But just before she left the house, Elizabeth came in and tearfully asked him to leave Osborne alone. She roared like a beluga, said she was expecting a child from him, asked for mercy and not to leave the child without a father. Osborne, losing all patience, waited for Hillary first near the box office, then waited on the street. He called her countless times, sent her messages, but Hillary didn't answer a single call or read a single message. Unable to stand it, he ran to her house, hoping that Hillary didn't show up for a very good reason. But her parents said Hillary had left without leaving her return address. She broke the Simca in front of her parents, throwing it in the trash. Osborne was ready to jump on the wall out of anger, trying to understand and unravel her cunning, and no one understands her move. Elizabeth was a shoulder to lean on during that difficult time. For 3 years she was always by his side, diligently helping him to find the girl he loved, tried to get to his heart, and always said that she would never do that to him. Osborne's heart trembled, and 3 years later, he and Elizabeth played a wedding. God never gave them children, though. "Hillary, you realize I want to know the truth, right? I'm not going anywhere until I know the truth." Osborne couldn't take his eyes off Albert, trying to get a good look at him. "Uncle, why are you looking at me like that?" Osborne opened his mouth for a moment, wanting to answer, but couldn't find the words. He turned his gaze to Hillary. From her worried face, he understood everything. Albert's words about Dad leaving them were echoing in his head. "My son, is that really true? What if it isn't? And I made it all up?" His brain was melting from the information he had received. Osborne stood up, sighing heavily. His whole body clenched from the pain in his chest. It was hard to breathe. He realized that now was the moment when one careless word could hurt Hillary, and he might not learn anything again. He would lose her again and never find her again. The main thing now was to get Hillary to talk to him. To talk. Find out why. Maybe even the bitter truth that his wife always told him and she really never needed him. Osborne held out his hand to Albert. "I invite you to the entertainment center. I'm sure you'll like it there." Albert's eyes lit up and he looked at Hillary. "Mom, may I?" Hillary nodded her head in agreement. "Uncle Osborne, is there a playroom where we're going?" "Mom, will you buy me an ice cream cone?" "Uncle Osborne, how long have you really known my mom?" Osborne answered all the questions and smiled. The happy smile never left his face. He didn't know why, but Osborne had grown attached to Albert. He liked answering all his questions, seeing his smile, and just being around this wonderful child. He stopped the car near the new entertainment center. Albert pulled them into the play area. Osborne noted to himself that the boy had been here before and more than once. The young girl took Albert's hand, assuring the parents not to worry and nothing terrible would happen to their child. All the children are supervised and their son will spend his hours at the entertainment center with great pleasure. Instructing Albert to behave himself, Hillary calmly let him go with the girl. Osborne took her hand and, surprised that Hillary didn't push him away, took her to a cafe near the game room. Osborne ordered and then looked at her face with pleasure. Still unable to believe his eyes, he tried to tune into the conversation and thanking the chauffeur who had poured the muddy puddle over his father. It was a pity he hadn't memorized the license plate. Osborne would have found him, kissed him on both cheeks, and thanked him for a good drive. "Is Albert my son?" The question that was on his mind most of all came out of his tongue. Hillary lowered her eyes, shrugging her shoulders. She was about to answer no, but Osborne suddenly covered her hand with his. Hillary flinched and looked into his eyes in surprise. As they rode in the car, she had gone over several options in her head and had settled on the only one that was right, and decided not to interfere with his marital happiness with Elizabeth. But now the word yes came out of her mouth. "Yes, Osborne, Albert is your son, but that doesn't mean anything. You have a family." Elizabeth loves you. You'll have children of your own. Osborne undid the top button of his shirt and loosened his tie. His chest heaved with injustice at how she could do such a cruel thing to him, and even now trying to manipulate him. Why did you disappear and not tell me you were having a baby with me? I was looking for you like a fool, not realizing anything. Waiting. Osborne stammered. He took a sip of water. It didn't seem enough. He took a few more sips. Why bring up the past, Osborne? He heard Hillary's voice. Are you seeing someone? I mean, a man, a husband, a loved one? Osborne said those words, but he was sure he wouldn't let anyone else raise his son. I have no one. You have Elizabeth. Hillary bit her lower lip in thought. Osborne took a wait-and-see attitude, but Hillary remained silent. I've been waiting for you for 3 years. I was hoping that you would come back and explain everything to me. I'm waiting for your explanations, Hillary. What's to explain? That day I was going to the movies with you. Elizabeth came running and crying, begging me to leave you alone because she was expecting your child. And you believed all that bullshit, without even talking to me? Hillary, where's your brain? I never slept with her. He stopped, swallowed loudly. I started seeing her after you disappeared. It was 2 years, and then we were married. Osborne clarified. Remember that time I caught you in the restaurant? You were kissing. And then we had a fight, and you didn't come to see me for a week. Elizabeth told me you were with her all week, and then you made up with me and then you left her abruptly. Osborne slammed his hand down on the table with anger. Lies. Quiet, don't shout. There are people around. People are already looking back at us. Hillary looked around. Osborne, behave yourself. Hillary, believe me, nothing happened between us back then. I swear on my health. And I've told you before and I'll tell you again. That kiss was an accident. She kissed me as a joke. I was surprised and shocked by her action. He put his hands around his temples and started rubbing them. They sat in silence for a while, staring at each other. Then Hillary spoke softly. Now you know everything. I didn't want to tell you about my son. But as it happened, she furrowed her brow and sighed heavily. Let's not tell Albert you're his father yet. You're going to leave now, and he's going to bombard me with questions I can't answer. That's out of the question. All right, Hillary, that's enough. You've made a mess of things already. How dare you hide your son from me? I've always loved you, and I love you now. Osborne flushed. He clenched his fists in anger at his wife, Hillary, at what she had done. And even now he's trying to do what she wants to do. Don't forget you're married. I'm not gonna come between you two. Did Elizabeth know you have a son? He interrupted her. Osborne was not going to listen to any more of this nonsense. He looked at Hillary intently. She turned away, barely holding back her tears. Osborne's eyes darkened. I'll kill her. He understood without words. She's a monster. She's an abomination. How could I have bought it? With his hands in his hair, Osborne couldn't say another word. To realize that all this time he'd been living with a woman who'd lied to him, lying without remorse and yet appearing to be a calm and loving wife. It was disgusting and even disgusting. Hillary stood up and gestured to the time. It's time to pick up Albert. You stay here. I'll go get him myself. No, I'll go with you. Don't forget he's my son too. Osborne called the waiter, said a few words and hurried after Hillary. Mommy, Uncle Osborne. He ran right up to them. Hillary thanked the girl who had accompanied him and took her son's hand. Osborne also held out his hand. Albert did not hesitate to give him his own. Albert was overwhelmed with emotion. He choked and swallowed his words and told about his new fairy tale journey. Osborne listened with pleasure, smiled and wondered together with him. He asked questions, which Albert answered with pleasure. They drove up to the house about 10 o'clock in the evening. Uncle Osborne, come and visit us. I'll introduce you to my grandmother. Osborne looked at Hillary questioningly. He didn't want to leave his son. Osborne had already imagined in his mind that they were one happy family. Will you come in? Hillary hoped he would refuse. If you'll let me. Osborne exhaled loudly and noisily, realizing finally that he probably had no rival. If he did, Hillary wouldn't have invited him over for a night out. The cats were scratching at his soul again. They scratched at his soul with such force that it became unbearable to think and breathe. If Elizabeth hadn't put a stick in his wheels, he would have found Hillary in no time. But Elizabeth was always there for him, going to her parents, calling her grandmother. She'd come up with the answers and give him the information she wanted. Good evening. Osborne cringed under Suzanne's gaze. It was hard to make eye contact with this sweet grandmother. Good evening. She looked at Hillary in surprise. But Albert turned his attention to himself, talking for the third time about where they'd been and what he'd been doing at the rec center. That's it. Grandma stroked her great-grandson's head. She glanced at Osborne and smiled at Albert, listening to his confused story. It's late. Let's run to the shower and go to bed. Susanna Petrovna left Hillary to socialize with Osborne. She barely got Albert to bed. He kept trying to play with Uncle Osborne, tried to get Granny to show him her toys. Then he asked Uncle Osborne to read him a story. He only calmed down when Osborne came into his room. He agreed that tomorrow he would pick him up with his mother from kindergarten and they would go out again. Osborne went into the kitchen. Hillary stood with her back to him and looked out the window, mentally setting herself up for the most serious conversation of her life. Osborne opened his mouth, but his wife called him. He dropped the call, then dropped the second, third, fifth. Without thinking, Osborne put the phone on silent, but Elizabeth didn't calm down and called Hillary. Elizabeth is on the phone. What can I tell her? Nothing. Put her phone on the blacklist. Osborne wrinkled his face in squeamishness. Talking to his wife didn't fit in with his plans. I can't do that, Osborne. How does she know you're with me? My father, I think. That's even better. Let her prepare herself thoroughly. Let's see how she turns herself inside out this time. Don't think about her. Let's talk about us. Osborne took her hands in his. Tell me about your life. How have I been? Hillary grinned. At first I was very angry with you. Then I found out I was expecting a child. I wanted to get rid of it, but my grandmother wouldn't let me, saying it was a big sin. I graduated from university by correspondence, but I didn't go to work by profession. I opened my own store. My parents helped me. My grandmother gave me all her coffin money, said she wasn't going to die anytime soon. Didn't you ever want to tell me about your son? When Albert was born, I was still single. I really wanted to, but Mom said she sees you with Elizabeth all the time, and Elizabeth called me and said you two were in love. I didn't want to put you in the position of having to choose. I knew it wouldn't be in my favor. It's all my fault. I'm filing divorce papers tomorrow. We don't have children. Thank God. They'll divorce us quickly. Let her look for another sucker who will tolerate her double standards. I can't even see her. Osborne didn't get home until the morning. He sat in the car for a long time. He calmed himself down and set himself up for a long and productive conversation. Where have you been? Elizabeth ran out into the hallway as soon as she heard the creak of the front door. Her eyes sparkled with hatred. A crooked grin contorted her face. Don't you have a clue? As far as I know, you can anticipate every move I make. No matter how much you pretend, your deceitful nature is out in the open. Osborne tried to look calm. I wanted to grab her by the scruff of the neck and throw her out the door. We have IVF tomorrow, Elizabeth said softly. We spent so much time on tests, she continued. I'm not interested anymore. Osborne waved his hand and turned away. Even so, Elizabeth remembered how Osborne had dreamed of having a child. He had asked her just to give birth, and he would carry her in his arms for the rest of his life. And now that he knew he had a son, he's just gonna cut her out of his life. He's gonna go off to Hillary and she's gonna be alone. Oh no, let's see you go to your lovely Hillary. Well, it's a good thing we had insurance just in case. We turned it in early and froze his stuff. Let's see how you feel when I tell you that you're going to be the father of our child. This time it's gonna be fair and honest. I'm the luckiest dad. I have a son. I need to share this news with my dad right away. Osborne slumped on the couch in his suit, staring at the ceiling and just daydreaming. This news was on the one hand, happy. On the other hand, it was like a blow to the head, and then it was indescribable delight. What a pity that his son was not born in marriage, as it should be. It's imperative that we make things right. Give Albert his own name. Introduce him to his relatives, Grandma, Grandpa. Go take a shower. You're sickening to look at. Elizabeth wrinkled her nose in squeamishness. She didn't want to look at the happy face of her beloved husband. After all, everything was so good. Why did he go to this Mukhosrensk? Couldn't her father have signed that unfortunate contract himself? Damn him? Elizabeth was sure that Osborne had coped with his sick love for Hillary. After all, Elizabeth had separated the couple and loved territorially in different cities. She had no idea that they would go to this rundown mall and her husband would meet his beloved Hillary. Osborne, think carefully about your behavior. You have nothing to reproach me with. So Hillary said something stupid. I'm sorry. But I had no idea she'd do that. And I was there for you the whole time, supporting you. Osborne, I love you very much and I love you now. Elizabeth struggled to find the words to justify her actions. Well, why don't you say something? Don't forget that I was young and stupid then. I didn't realize what I was doing. Let's take an hour nap. I have to be at work in the morning. Leave me alone. Don't touch me. Don't make me angry. Osborne closed his eyes and remembered his son's happy face and smiled. He'd never been that happy, unless it was when he was a kid, when his parents bought him a whole carton of ice cream. Brought it home and delighted Osborne to no end. I forgot to warn you. I'm filing for divorce today. There's no point in dragging it out. I'm not going to live with you. I want to always be with my family. You should see what a handsome and intelligent son I have. Osborne sighed and shook his head. Have you said everything? Keep a close eye on your Hillary. She'll be on the run again. It will take another 5 years to find her, maybe more, hissed Elizabeth and grinned. Osborne opened his eyes. When he saw his wife's unkind face, he choked several times. Pack your things and leave. I do not want to live with you under the same roof. If truth be told, I'm even afraid of you. See a psychologist, or better yet, a psychiatrist. Get a referral. You need to have your head checked. A normal person wouldn't think of such a thing. You'd be lying. You'd be getting a cheap price. Don't even think about it. I'm still your wife and I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. Osborne put his finger up. It's a matter of time. He grinned. I hope you heard me, Elizabeth. Be reasonable. I've been having trouble hearing you lately. Elizabeth could hardly hold back her tears. Everything was fine, and suddenly there was this impenetrable wall again. She wanted to break through it, remove it and start over. Elizabeth sighed heavily, but decided to keep silent. There was no point in arguing with her husband. Elizabeth, let's have a quiet divorce. Come on, she said, and Osborne choked with surprise. Are you serious? He shook his head in surprise, not believing his own ears. I'm dead serious. We're doing IVF with you and I'm letting you go. You can go to Hillary's house, go to the ends of the earth. All I want is a baby from you. We've been going at this for a long time. I can't just quit halfway through. My dream is to become a mother and give birth to a healthy child. Elizabeth, let's not joke about this. I don't mean this anymore. I have a son. Having a baby alone without a husband. You expect me to come to my senses and not file for divorce. I think that's too stupid. Osborne grinned. I figured out your cunning plan. For the sake of our old relationship. Osborne, think about it. I'll agree to a divorce at once. No. The answer was emphatic. It's out of the question. The receptionist calmly explained the obvious to Elizabeth. He and I signed the IVF consent form together. What else? My husband can't make it to the procedure today. That's why we froze his material. My husband is a very busy man. Embryo transfer is signed by both spouses on the same day. We'll have to reschedule. Maybe your spouse can make time and come with you next time. In case of emergency, you could get a power of attorney from a notary. Let me sign it. You saw perfectly well that your husband agrees to IVF. Elizabeth opened her handbag. She took out a puffy envelope. Here you are. Take some candy for the children. A little present for my husband and me. I hate bureaucracy, especially with so little risk involved. My husband is sure he has all his papers in order. Elizabeth's fingers were trembling with excitement and the envelope in her hands was shaking. Wiping her tears, she handed the envelope to the girl. Elizabeth, I don't even know what the right thing to do is. All right, I know your husband agrees. Sign for him. I hope Osborne Igorovich won't kill us for this. Don't even worry. My husband will be very grateful to you. He's worried and praying for a positive outcome. All right, all the bureaucratic hurdles have been cleared. Now let's go to the OR. The girl took the envelope and put it in the desk. I hope my labors will not be in vain. Elizabeth looked at her doctor with a pleading look in her eyes. It happens. Some people come to us several times. I hope that I can do it right the first time. Elizabeth crossed her fingers for luck and went into the operating room. Hello. Osborne, this is the IVF center. We've changed our minds. My wife and I are getting divorced. Osborne interrupted the receptionist. "We'd understand, Osborne. Don't worry, no one will do the procedure without your consent," the girl reassured him. "Did she come to your center without me?" "Don't worry, Osborne. Everything's under control." "I hope so." Osborne exhaled. "Thanks for calling." He hung up. "They're getting a divorce. The husband said he didn't want it." "That's what I thought." The doctor grinned and shook his head. "Don't forget to give her the envelope back." The doctor sighed heavily and walked briskly into the operating room. "Elizabeth, I'm sorry, but without the written consent of your husband, we can do nothing." The doctor, with a guilty smile on his face, spread his hands. "It seems to me that for his signature, I generously thanked your clinic. Or did you think that's not enough? Did you decide to make more money off me? I don't understand why we're having this conversation." Elizabeth tried to control herself, but the situation was starting to get out of hand. She had already given them a lot of money. Did they really think it wasn't enough? Her eyes glistened involuntarily and she blew her nose. The doctor handed her a napkin. "Please go to the receptionist. She will explain everything to you." The doctor shifted his gaze to the uncomprehending nurse and left the operating room with a quick step. "I don't understand." Elizabeth pulled the cap off her head with trembling hands. "If they ask for more money, we'll have to go to Osborne, and he's not likely to agree to that. He's spending his funds on other people now." Elizabeth shrugged, remembering Hillary. What happened again? She turned to the receptionist and turned her gaze to the envelope that lay safely on the edge of the table. "Elizabeth, the thing is, we can't help you. We've contacted Osborne. You don't have to go on." "That's what I thought." Elizabeth grabbed the envelope. A wry grin appeared on her face. It was very difficult to cope with her growing sense of irritation and nervousness. Her mood was changing with every word she uttered. "I hope this is the whole amount." She waved the envelope in front of the receptionist's nose. "You insult me, Elizabeth. We have everything under surveillance." "Goodbye, then." She defiantly unzipped her purse and carelessly tossed the envelope into it. "Good thing John made me call her husband," Sarah thought to herself as she looked at Elizabeth. That sneaky woman. Osborne pounded his fist on the table with all his might. The father looked at his son in surprise. "Osborne, what's wrong?" The clinic called. Elizabeth came in alone for IVF. "Well done for calling." He loosened his tie in one movement. "When is she gonna calm down?" "What if you believed her and didn't call?" "She loves you." Her father tried to stand up for his daughter-in-law. "Dad, don't start. You're doing it again. The matter is settled. I filed divorce papers this morning. Thank God we have no children together." Osborne grinned. "Dad, you've got to meet your grandson. We went out together again yesterday. We've got to do something. I can't go there every day. I can't do it without them. Yesterday, I made a pitch to Hillary about moving. She wouldn't even let me finish. She's got her grandmother, she's got a business. She doesn't want me to tell her son that I'm his father." Osborne looked at his father thoughtfully. "I want to see my grandson myself, but I have my doubts. Is the child yours?" His father raised his left eyebrow and looked at Osborne. It's mine. I believe Hillary, and the timing is right. I'll have it analyzed to reassure you. But I don't care what it says. I'm going to marry her anyway. Albert is my son. I felt it instantly the first time I saw him." Osborne smiled at his father with his trademark dazzling smile. Osborne turned his head at the noise in the waiting room and was disappointed to find that the office had been entered without knocking. Loudly clomping her heels, Elizabeth slid in. She burst in like a fury and interrupted the conversation. "Speak of the devil." Osborne cursed quietly. "You should knock." He made a disgruntled face. He didn't want to see his wife lately. "Elizabeth is a beautiful woman, no doubt about it. Legs from the ears, a beautiful face, breasts at her. She was pleasant to look at. There were no outward blemishes. But compared to Hillary, she was a total loser. Hillary might be shorter and her legs might not be as long, but she was his Hillary." Osborne caught himself thinking that he had never felt a special sexual attraction to his wife. Why he had married her, he could not understand until now. Elizabeth defiantly pushed back her chair and sat down opposite Osborne. "Tell me, what have I done to you? I've been running after you like a mommy all my life. You're the only one I've ever lived with. Daddy, you have to feel sorry for me. Put some authority on him. When Hillary showed up, your son didn't even notice me. She's slipping. She's pulling a handkerchief out of her pocket. I want you to leave me a piece of yourself. I have served you faithfully all my life. She dropped her head on the table and burst into tears. Father grabbed a decanter from the table, poured water into a glass, and approached his daughter-in-law. "Elizaveta, calm down. Drink some water." He gently put his hand on her shoulder. "Dad, you know how I dreamed of the child." She took a sip and put the glass on the table. "It's done. So much nerve, so much time. All Osborne has to do is sign it." She looked at her father with tearful eyes. Osborne laughed and clapped his hands together. "Consider the concert for the viewers' requests over. Go pack your things. I don't want you in my apartment tonight. Were you hoping to suckle on me like a leech with IVF and suck my blood for the rest of your life? Didn't work out, so you decided to involve your father? No, you definitely need to get your head examined. Elizabeth, it's not funny anymore. You're becoming a danger to society. Comedy's over. My favorite woman will give birth to my children, but it's not you, Elizabeth. Your son left me because of that bitch. He won't talk to me, won't sign the IVF consent form. He treats me like a filthy yard dog." Bitter tears were streaming from her eyes. They prevented her from speaking clearly. Elizabeth swallowed her words but continued to complain. "I hate that bitch. I won't let her run my life. Influence and destroy everything I've built up with so much hard work. Don't you dare call Hillary trash. You better take a look at yourself. You're destroying everything in your path." Osborne cut her off in a tone that brooked no objection. "I'm destroying? Right now, your dear Hillary has insolently meddled in our family. She gave birth to a child of her own, and she took everything away from me. Took away my husband and even my dream of being a mother. I hate her so much." Elizabeth was no longer shy in her expressions. Her face twisted into a contemptuous grin. "You come anywhere near Hillary and I'll wipe you out. I warn you, if a single hair falls from her head, or my son's head, I'll make a chopped cutlet out of you," said Osborne with an impenetrable expression. "But don't get your hopes up. There's no telling how your fate will turn out. Maybe Hillary has already found a replacement for you. It is better to pay attention to those who sincerely treat you." Notwithstanding, the father again decided to stand up for his favorite daughter-in-law. Barry had always been good to Elizabeth. He recognized her as a loving and faithful wife. "Father, if you take her side, I'll never lay a hand on you again." Osborne rudely cut Father Osborne off. "You go pack your things and move in with your parents. You and I didn't buy anything when we were married. There's not much to divide. My father owns the firm. The property issue goes away. There's nothing more to talk about. Hillary, please believe me. I want Albert to call me Daddy, and I want you to be with me always." Osborne looked adoringly at his favorite woman. Hillary could hardly contain herself from screaming, "I do." Hillary had imagined and hoped many times that Osborne would find her. He'd come back with a big, beautiful bouquet of flowers. He'd beg her to forgive him, give her a ring. We'll get down on one knee and make a long-awaited proposal. Law speech, learning that he has a growing son, and will constantly thank her for Albert. But her dreams remain unfulfilled. "You have a wife." Hillary could barely hold back a tear. "We'll be divorced soon. Don't even think about it." Elizabeth had already packed her things and gone to her parents. Osborne had a suggestion on his tongue to move her and her son into his apartment. But he held back. He didn't want to push his authority on Hillary. But Hillary is no longer the naive girl who looked Osborne in the mouth 6 years ago. She's a grown-up, self-sufficient woman. She's got her own life, and she's not going to let Osborne into her heart just yet. "Why did you tell your son that Dad left you?" Osborne asked the question that worried him the most. "Didn't he? Did you want to justify yourself in my eyes?" Hillary raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Of course not. If you hadn't gone away." "Osborne, let's not talk about what happened 6 years ago. How did you manage to marry a girl who betrayed you? If you married her, you loved her, and maybe you still do. Maybe I left so you could figure it out, which is exactly what you did." Hillary was unstoppable. The resentment came up to her throat again. Hillary took a few deep breaths to reduce the anger. "I've always loved only you and never forgotten you." Osborne tried to make it up to her. "It's noticeable," grinned Hillary. "I want to make things right. We owe it to our son to be together. We don't owe anyone anything. Let's not rush things. I'm afraid that Albert will get attached to you, and you'll play father and disappear." "Don't talk nonsense. I love you and I don't need anyone else. Let's go to my place tonight. I want Albert to meet his grandparents." "How do you envision it?" "Just separated from his wife, and here we are with our son. I can imagine the surprised eyes of the neighbors. No, that's out of the question. At least not yet. Osborne could talk for a long time, but Hillary's demeanor made it clear that the conversation was over and there was no point in continuing. What a woman! Osborne thought to himself and decided to obey her. Oh, Elizabeth, what are you doing here? The neighbor on the landing stopped and looked at her from head to toe with undisguised curiosity. What has changed much? Became even more beautiful. Did you leave your husband? He slowly shifted his gaze to the bags. Can you help me carry them home? No problem. I'll do anything for you. Anything I want. Elizabeth remembered her mother's story that he divorced his wife. Now he lives with his parents and doesn't work anywhere. Will you help me take revenge on one insolent person who snuck into my family and divorced me and my husband? She did not take her eyes off, watching the neighbor's reaction. What do I have to do? The neighbor asked interestedly. It's not a big deal, just a little scare. Just take her child and play with him for 2 days at your dacha, to make her realize that it is immoral and can even be very dangerous to meddle in other people's families. Elizabeth, it's a dangerous occupation. The neighbor started to deny it. I'll pay you well. She took out of her bag the envelope she'd gotten back at the clinic. I hope this will be enough. The neighbor took the envelope, twirled it in his hands, looked into it and whistled in surprise. He raised one eyebrow and looked at Elizabeth. How did you have to be pissed off to give up that much money? Speak matter-of-factly. Will you help me? Rubbing her hands together contentedly, Elizabeth was already imagining the worried and crying face of her sworn friend. I like the sum, but the idea is not. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, but I myself have a child growing up. True, I divorced my wife and my son stayed with his mother, but for my child, I'd tear anyone apart without a drop of regret. It was unexpected. Elizabeth pressed her lips, hummed, and threw down from above. You're a bastard, Jervis. I thought better of you. It was an inhuman effort to restrain herself from laughing in his wrinkled face. She could barely hide her contempt. Elizabeth grinned crookedly, sighed heavily, looked at the envelope and carefully placed it in her purse. What a nuisance. It's not a happy envelope, she said quietly. Elizabeth hurried home, clomping her high stilettos, and for some reason it seemed that Jervis, helping her carry her bags into the apartment, was looking at her incredulously, barely restraining himself from laughing in her face. Thank you, she said. You're welcome, replied the neighbor and waved goodbye and silently left the apartment. Hillary had literally run away from Osborne that evening. The mood was disgusting. For 6 years feelings had not disappeared, and even on the contrary became even stronger. The soul screamed and rebelled. Osborne was the only man in her life, and she was just another, and if it were not for his son, then perhaps Osborne would not have divorced his wife. These thoughts were tearing her apart. However, even realizing this, Hillary could not give up this relationship. Barry could not wait. When the son brought a test for alleged paternity, and there in black and white were put the numbers 99.9. He began to ask Osborne to show, introduced, brought to visit the only grandson. But Osborne resisted and began to prove that it was not time yet. Hillary was against it and would not allow it yet. And then Barry decided to act on his own. Without saying a word to anyone, he found out the address himself. He made the necessary inquiries and drove to his grandson's home. After dialing the apartment number, Barry leaned into the microphone and said affectionately, Hillary, it's Osborne's dad. Could you open the door for me, please? Come in, came the surprised voice of the future daughter-in-law. Hillary met Barry on the landing. Hello, is something wrong? She asked worriedly. I want to meet my grandson. How long can you keep the truth from your child? Hillary froze on the spot, swallowed loudly, and began to speak excitedly and unintelligibly. Butul. Yeah, don't know. Albert doesn't know yet. I haven't told him yet. I've explained it to Osborne. Now we're going to go over it with you, Hillary. Listen to me and do as I ask. How long do we have to wait? Let me at least see my grandson. Albert is 5 years old and Grandpa hasn't even seen him. Hillary, my friends are gonna laugh at me. Barry spoke loud and clear. He decided he'd only leave after meeting his only grandson. Come on in, she said in an unhappy voice. While Hillary went to fetch her son, Barry had time to meet his grandmother. He piled the presents from the bags onto the coffee table, but his grandmother just shook her head and shook her hands. Where are all these presents going? They wouldn't fit in the room. I can't go to my grandson's house empty-handed. I went to a children's store for the first time and my eyes went wild. What beautiful toys children have now. Barry stopped half speaking because he saw Albert. He stood modestly near Hillary and looked at the strange man in surprise. "Hi, I'm your grandpa. Daddy will be here soon. I brought you some presents." Barry squatted down and held out his hand to Albert. "Mom, is this my grandfather?" Albert held out his hand incredulously and looked at Hillary. "Meet Albert. This is your grandfather," smiled Hillary at him. "Where's my daddy then?" The intercom buzzed. "Here comes Daddy," Barry said affectionately. All four of them went straight to the hallway. Hillary opened the door and let Osborne into the apartment. "Hillary, I had nothing to do with this. My father took the initiative. I didn't even know." Osborne looked at his father unhappily. "Uncle Osborne, are you my father?" He heard his son's voice. "Yes," Osborne said quietly. "Hooray!" Albert jumped up and hung around his father's neck. Osborne held Albert close to him and squeezed his eyes shut. Then he started kissing him randomly on his cheeks, on his forehead, on his nose. And I knew right away that Uncle Osborne was my daddy. Albert turned his head and looked at everyone with a satisfied smile on his face. Barry was wiping away a stingy male tear. Grandma was just sniffling, her tear-red eyes downcast. Hillary smiled at her son's delight. Osborne, too, could not help his feelings. He turned away from everyone to hold back the tears and not to cry himself. Osborne blinked often, still holding his son tightly in his arms. Albert wrapped his arms around his face, turned and looked up at his father. He smiled and began to wipe away his tears with the palm of his hand. "Daddy, don't cry. It's good that I have you." Albert clung to Osborne again. "Don't let them say I don't have a daddy now. I'll tell everyone at daycare tomorrow that I have my daddy back," Albert said in a serious tone, and Osborne smiled happily. "Albert, I love you more than anything in the world. If I'd only known I had you, I would have come up sooner." "Papa, you didn't leave Mommy and me, did you? You just didn't know I was born?" he asked in childlike surprise. "Of course, my darling." Osborne kissed him again. "How could I refuse such a wonderful son?" Osborne touched his nose with his index finger. "Are you going to live with us now?" They looked at each other in surprise, and Osborne looked questioningly at Hillary. "All that remains is to persuade your mother. I really want to live with you, but Mama's a little reluctant." "Mom, let Dad live with us. We'll all live together. Me, you, Grandma, and Dad. There'll be enough room for everyone. And Grandpa will come to visit us." Albert looked at Hillary and demanded an immediate and positive answer. "I'll think about it, son." Hillary answered his question with a heavy sigh. "Why live at Grandma's? Your dad has his own apartment." Barry put in his word. He was upset to the core and was ready to move his grandson and Hillary to his son's apartment right now. "Your son is still officially married," Hillary reminded him, and Barry bit his tongue, remembering that Hillary was right and he had a daughter-in-law. "Dad, can we go to the entertainment center again? And I'm going to Melvin's birthday party tomorrow, and I want you to take me, not Mom. I want everyone to see what a handsome daddy I have." Everyone laughed, and Osborne stroked his son's head. "Of course, son. We'll go to the movies and to the entertainment center, and tomorrow I'll take you to your friend's party with your mom." "No, alone. Mom will stay at home." "All right, I'll take you alone." Osborne agreed with a smile on his face. "Come in, dear guests. Why are we standing in the hallway?" The grandmother came to her senses, inviting the dear guests into the house. Osborne drove the car home and remembered how Hillary came to the landing to see him off. Instead of talking, Osborne took courage and immediately attracted her to him. His father turned away and, without waiting for the elevator, went down the stairs on foot, leaving them alone. "Are you crazy? What if the neighbors come out?" "No one is out. Not even a light bulb is on," Osborne said quietly, pressing Hillary even more tightly against him. "You're married," he heard his favorite woman whisper timidly. "Consider it not. Soon you and Albert will be my family. Our son needs a father. You see how happy he was when he found out I was his father." Osborne felt Hillary's resistance weaken slightly. He took advantage of that and pulled her even more tightly against his chest. He found her lips in the darkness and kissed them greedily. They kissed for 40 minutes, no less, until the elevator doors opened and the neighbor on the landing came out. Osborne could not get away from that kiss. He remembered it all the way home and the way Hillary had responded to him. Little by little droplets pulling out his loving heart. Osborne twisted his face and swore obscenely at the entire cabin. He sighed heavily when he saw a familiar silhouette in the darkness. There could be no mistake. Elizabeth was standing by her car, talking on the phone. When she saw Osborne, she quickly dropped the call and strode toward him. "Hi, aren't you tired of driving all this way to see your son?" She watched his reaction with a wry grin. "Are you following me?" "No, why?" "Just asking." Elizabeth made a surprised face and shook her head. "Why did you come again? It seems to me that you and I have already decided everything. I need to get something else," she explained calmly. "I started to unpack and couldn't find some of my documents." "Okay, let's go, but quickly. I'm very tired today." Osborne gave her a squeamish, scrutinizing look. He stopped abruptly as he said those words, deciding to postpone her visit until morning. He opened his mouth, but Elizabeth beat him to it. "Don't worry, I won't keep you long. I'll take the documents and leave at once." Osborne looked at Elizabeth carefully again. He didn't want to believe her, but there was a strange uneasiness in his soul. What was the necessity of picking up the documents at the first hour of the night? "What are you up to again?" he grumbled unhappily. "Why are you hurting me? Every action of mine you take in the bayonet. Why?" "Until Hillary came along, we were doing fine." Elizabeth raised her eyebrows in surprise. "If you think you can come to me anytime you want, you are very deluded. You and I broke up and you don't have to come over late at night." "I'm sorry, darling, but I don't want to take any more chances." Osborne stopped abruptly at the front door and turned to Elizabeth. "What documents do you want? I'll have them delivered to your house tomorrow at your convenience. Are you afraid of me? By the way, I'm still a resident here, and just because I left voluntarily without making a scene doesn't mean I can't come back and get my stuff. I think I said in Russian that I'm tired and exhausted. Hosting is not on my agenda. I'm sorry." Osborne got his keys, opened the front door, turned his head. When he saw that Elizabeth wasn't going anywhere, he sighed defiantly and loudly. "Elizabeth, where is your feminine pride? Don't you realize that I don't want to see you? You have already broken so much wood that I have never dreamed of. You'll have to repent your sins to Hillary and your son for a long time to come." Osborne opened the door and walked into the house. He turned around and blocked the entrance to the apartment. He looked at his ex-wife with a disgruntled look. There was no doubt in his mind that she was an ex-wife. You've gotten so rude. Osborne, where's your education? Since when did you become afraid of weak and defenseless women? It seems to me that you and I have always lived well and trusted each other. You don't even have the guts to part on good terms, like all civilized people." Elizabeth shrugged and grinned. "You have everything?" he thundered, beginning to lose his patience. "Even water with fear will not offer, not to mention tea or coffee. I've waited so long for you. Osborne, I really need to see some paperwork, and I've missed you so much. Don't you realize you can't just put everything out of your mind? Unlike you, I loved you very much, and I still do. Understand? It's very hard for me." Osborne mentally raised his hands to the sky. He was really bloody tired. Nerves like bare wires, already just sparked. It was impossible to hold back the hurtful words and foul language. They were on his tongue and wanted to come out. "I hope you understand me. Bye. Throw me the list of documents," Osborne said in a hoarse voice, closing the door in front of Elizabeth's nose. He sank tiredly onto the ottoman and listened to the sounds in the hallway. Only when the elevator doors slammed shut did Osborne exhale with relief and shut the second door. "No, Mommy, I'm not going anywhere without Daddy. I've already told everyone that Daddy's bringing me. Do you want everyone to laugh at me and think I'm a liar?" Albert crossed his arms over his chest, pouted his lips, sat down in his chair, and turned away. "Daddy will be here soon. Let's get dressed," Hillary reassured her son. "Really? You're not lying to me?" Really. Hillary shook her head. When she heard the ringing tone, she looked at the incoming number and smiled. "Hillary, I'm on my way up." "Come on out," she heard Osborne's long-awaited voice. Albert was the first to jump out of the building and shouted, "Hurrah!" He ran into his father's arms. "What took you so long, Papa? I thought you weren't coming, didn't I?" "It just happened, son. I had to go to the tire shop. 2 flat tires." Osborne opened the passenger door. When he saw Hillary, he pulled her to him and kissed her on the cheek. I missed you," Osborne whispered in her ear. Hillary glanced at her son, but Albert was already sitting in the child's seat and, without paying attention to his parents, fastened his seatbelt. Hillary ran into her department just for a few minutes. Today she and her son are going to Osborne's parents. Hillary took this step just for the sake of her son. And Albert, of course, was put up to it by his dad. "Hello, Hillary," she heard a woman's voice behind her. "Hello, Elizabeth." Her heart thudded and drummed. Her mood immediately slipped to below zero. Although just a few minutes ago, Hillary wanted to sing and dance with joy. "Let's talk," Elizabeth hissed angrily. "I wonder what about? Don't we have anything to talk about? We have one husband for two, in case you've forgotten. I'm not married yet. But that doesn't stop you from sleeping with another man's husband." Elizabeth spoke loudly, almost shouting. "I'm not sleeping with Osborne. He's the father of my son. I can't forbid him from associating with Albert." Hillary shrugged his shoulders. "That's how you talk. You used to tell everyone it was just your son." Elizabeth grabbed Hillary's hair, wrapped it around her fist, and pulled sharply. "If I ever see her near my husband again, let me go." Hillary intercepted her hand, but Elizabeth held her hair tightly in her fist. Hillary cried out, tears welling up in her eyes. She and the saleswoman unlocked her arms, and the girl pulled Elizabeth aside. "Do you understand me? She's trash. If I see her with my husband, your illegitimate son will get one too. Decided to put your Ishenka in safe hands. I warned you," shouted at the whole floor Elizabeth. "I didn't expect you to be such a psychopath." Breathing deeply to calm her trembling, Hillary said. She didn't know where to hide her eyes in shame. "I warned you," Elizabeth replied and walked proudly out of the department. "Hillary, don't pay attention and don't be sad." Maria sat her down on the sofa and began to calm her down. "Think about it. If she was fine with her husband, would she have come to you with threats? She's probably tried all the remedies. Nothing worked. She decided to come to you. Fighting over a man. It's the last thing you want to do. What's it got to do with you? Let her deal with her husband." "That's embarrassing." Hillary shook her head and bit her lower lip. "Now I'm going to call Osborne and refuse to meet his parents. I don't want anything. Why only Albert had been told about his father? We lived peacefully and without him. And now we have to feel like on top of a volcano." Hillary kept sniffing her nose and carefully wiped her tears. The upcoming trip to Osborne's parents seemed silly ridiculousness now. At the moment, Hillary was feeling very depressed. An inner voice kept telling her to pull herself together, to stop sulking and give up on her relationship with Osborne. Hillary took out her cell phone and dialed Osborne's number. But then, after a little brainstorming, she dropped the call and hot-footed it to the text message. Why did she have to listen to all this nonsense? I don't mean his wife tracking me down and intimidating me. What right does she have to throw herself at me and call me obscene words? I have no one to protect me. And Elizabeth senses this and behaves as she sees fit. At the end, she wrote that we were not welcome to visit, and that Osborne should not come for a while. I need to think hard and sort myself out. She made a note that she didn't want such a relationship. Hillary released all her emotions and calmed down, realizing that if she and Osborne meet today, nothing good can be expected from this meeting. History repeats itself. Again, Elizabeth intrudes into their relationship. Last time she succeeded, she achieved her goal and married Osborne. Who knows, maybe it will work this time. Osborne will come to his senses and take the divorce petition. Having sent the message to its destination, Hillary turned off the phone and carelessly threw it into her handbag. Osborne reread the message from Hillary for the 10th time. He called several times, but the phone was unavailable. His mood had plummeted. He was 200% sure that he would persuade Hillary to stay with his son tonight. But Elizabeth had intervened again. The nascent fragility of the relationship was back to square one. Osborne pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. "Where are you now?" he shouted into the receiver. "I'm on my way to the house." Elizabeth answered in a calm tone. "I'll be right there." Osborne dropped the call and practically ran out of the office. He drove on autopilot to the house of Elizabeth's parents. Angry, he couldn't unbuckle his seatbelt for a long time. With eyes as red as a bull's, I jumped into her car and grabbed her by the throat. "I'm gonna strangle you, and I'm not gonna get hurt. You're the kind of bastard that can't be rehabilitated. Only death will reform you." Elizabeth stared in horror and Osborne's hand gripped her throat tighter and tighter. She was desperately short of breath, and Osborne's face expressed absolute rage. He leaned in close to her ear and hissed angrily. Ready to die? A haunting thought flashed through her head. If she shook her head in agreement, he wouldn't hesitate to strangle her and wouldn't even flinch. Hire a good lawyer. But Elizabeth began to shake her head, showing her complete disagreement. Tears spurted from her eyes. Osborne grinned squeamishly and removed his hand. Elizabeth began to cough and breathe heavily. Are you mad? She hissed as she continued to gulp in air. You need treatment. You almost strangled me. Did you want to go to jail? Almost doesn't count. Next time I'll strangle you if you go near Hillary or my son. This is your last warning. Don't take offense later. You'll be plotting your wickedness in the afterlife. I'm not kidding. Osborne pointed his index finger at her. Elizabeth held her throat with one hand and wiped her nose in tears with the other. I hope you understand me. I can't hear you? Shouted Osborne to the whole salon and reached out to her throat again. I do. Elizabeth tried to shout back through her tears, but she did not succeed. She looked at her ex-husband with undisguised disgust. I will not repeat twice. My next actions will be tougher. The country is big. There is a lot of land. He opened the passenger door and without saying goodbye got out of the car. Elizabeth dropped her head on the steering wheel and cried. Hillary realized she had snapped. She couldn't stand it. She told Osborne everything that had boiled up in her soul. It had been 3 hours. She wanted to turn on the phone and have a quiet conversation, but pride and resentment, like a huge angry dog on a strict collar, did not allow her to make this step. Elizabeth's words about the illegitimate son, whom Hillary dreams of adopting. The most offensive thing is that it was Elizabeth who had a hand in this, and now reproaches. I had to explain to Albert long and tediously that today to go and get acquainted with his grandmother will not be possible. She told him all sorts of nonsense just to keep him away and not to pester him with her questions, to which Hillary herself did not know the answers. Hillary had already bathed Albert and put him to bed. She tried again to answer his many questions honestly and without offense. The bell on the front door rang. Her heart shrank to the size of a small balloon. Her palms sweated and a chill ran down her spine. She went to the door and looked through the peephole. When she saw Osborne, she sighed heavily but opened the door. Would you let me in? He looked at her with guilty eyes. Come in. Osborne went into the apartment and closed the door quietly, so as not to make any noise. Hillary closed her eyes. The anger had receded, but the thought that there was no future in their relationship lingered in her mind. Why did you disconnect the phone? Osborne whispered. He took Hillary by the shoulders, staring intently at her face and reading every micro-movement from it. I didn't want to talk to you. I was afraid I'd say something rude to you, and then regret it. Hillary was still trying not to look at Osborne. That's it? He tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and then ran his fingertips gently over her cheek. Hillary, how many times do you have to do this? Why don't you stop hiding from me and we'll work things out together? Don't you think I can't protect you? For the sake of you and Albert, I'm willing to go to the extreme. If she comes near you again, she'll be in trouble, I swear to you. I had a tough conversation with her today. I gave her a final Chinese warning. Do you believe me? Osborne gently took her chin and forced her to look into his eyes. I am afraid of her. Elizabeth is sick in the head, Osborne. You should have heard her calling our son names, screaming that I'm trying to force him on you. I can't imagine the eyes I'll be wearing to work tomorrow. I'm so ashamed. Hillary sniffled with resentment. Remember, you have me now. Your troubles are my troubles. When we're together, we're safe from Elizabeth. I explained it to her today. I repent to you that I had to use a little force. But there's no other way to deal with her. She doesn't understand simple human words. I was afraid you'd grab our son and run away again. Osborne held Hillary close and kissed the top of her head. When I got your message, I freaked out. I jumped in the car and raced to Elizabeth's. You don't want to know what happened between us. But take my word for it, it was not easy for her. I explained clearly that I would go to extreme measures. I hope she understood me and made the appropriate conclusions. Osborne continued. Do you believe me? Hillary nodded her head silently. Osborne sighed heavily and kissed her gently on the top of her head again. Hillary, I won't leave you alone anymore. Let's decide something. Osborne looked at her expectantly. He was anxious for Hillary's immediate consent. Even his insides clenched into one big lump from nervous tension. Hillary stared at one point and bit her lips. Then she pulled away from Osborne and grinned crookedly. What if it doesn't work out? I don't even think about it. We'll make it work. Don't you doubt it. I'm sure of it, and no one can change my mind, Osborne said in a confident tone. Get a divorce first. She bit in where it hurt. When you're divorced, then we'll talk. Right now, this conversation is inappropriate. Hillary broke free of his embrace. Hillary, I'm warning you, I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'm already dreaming about this road at night. Osborne made a hurt face. All right, I'll make up the couch for you. I hope Grandma won't mind, Hillary agreed. She held out her hand to him and they went into the kitchen together. But first, I'll make you some tea. Not a bad suggestion. Osborne smiled his charming smile. Elizabeth sobbed in the car, remembering all her worthless life. How she had fallen madly in love with her almost ex-husband. How she had pursued him, stepping on her own pride. But nothing good came of it. In the end, Elizabeth was left with nothing. Today, for the first time, she was frightened to see the hatred in her husband's eyes. Osborne defended his beloved Hillary with such unbelievable tenacity that Elizabeth was afraid for her life. She was not on a joke chickened out, trying to get out of his strong hands. Osborne squeezed her throat so hard that Elizabeth was ready to say goodbye to her life. Who would have thought that this evening would end like this? If Elizabeth hadn't fought so desperately, she might not be alive anymore. In those short, tense minutes, her whole life flashed before her eyes like a movie. Realizing that she was on a hair's breadth from mortal danger, Elizabeth finally decided that she didn't need a man to hold her back. It is not worth wasting energy and time on a man who does not love you, and probably never did. At one time it seemed that her love is enough for two, and now they both suffered, Elizabeth from unrequited love, and Osborne from the fact that he still loved Hillary and has never felt something like that for his lawful wife. Soon they will be divorced, and it will all be over before it even begins. Having cried enough, Elizabeth consoled herself with the thought that she was still young. She has her whole life ahead of her. Perhaps when she calmed down, Elizabeth would meet a man who would really love her. She would have a child and live as well as Osborne. Elizabeth opened the door and stepped out of her car with determination. She looked around with a haggard look and red, tear-stained eyes. With shaking hands, she took the keys out of her purse and quickly dashed down the driveway. No more. From now on, she would learn to respect and appreciate herself. She was tired of being afraid of something, of lying and dodging, fawning over Osborne and his relatives, trying to please them to please. This no one appreciated and will never appreciate. A man cherishes a woman when he loves her. And Elizabeth Osborne has never loved and will never love. First of all, it is necessary to do everything to look worthy in the eyes of people around her. Do not look at how her former acquaintances and friends live. They have their own lives, and Elizabeth will have her own new life. It's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, but she's going to try. It's not a given that she'll succeed, but it's worth a try. Before moving Hillary and her son into her apartment, Osborne called a cleaning company and made sure that everything was shiny, and not even one small detail did not remind his beloved of his ex-wife. One room he hastily converted into a nursery, filled it with toys and games. He even bought some school supplies, just in case. However, when he showed Hillary his bachelor pad, he immediately said, if she is embarrassed by the fact that Osborne lived here not alone, but with Elizabeth, one word and Osborne will sell the apartment without a second thought, and with the proceeds they will buy another. For him, the main thing is that Hillary nothing embarrassed and did not remind of his past life. I don't care where to live. The main thing is with you and our son. His eyes sparkled with happiness, and the smile never left his face. Osborne gently stroked the still flat belly of his beloved woman and continued the thought in a tender voice. And with our future little princess. By the way, you've thought of a name for our daughter. We have plenty of time. Hillary waved it off. I want to name my daughter Lara. Is that okay with you? No way. Of course I mind. Hillary wrinkled her face in a grimace. Where did you find such an old-fashioned name? Let me take over this mission. You're not very good with names. You better do your job. Hillary replied in a serious tone. Maybe you're right. Osborne scratched his ear thoughtfully and looked guiltily at his wife. The evening promised to be unforgettable. Yesterday he and Hillary had married, and today she as his lawful wife is moving into his apartment. Osborne dreamed of a lavish wedding, with a veil, expensive beautiful dress, with a limousine. That champagne flowed, friends congratulated and drank to their health and family happiness. But Hillary flatly refused to celebrate. She agreed only to a modest wedding in the registry office and a dinner in the circle of the closest people. There is nothing to be done. The word of his beloved wife for Osborne the law, with relatives modestly sat in the restaurant. Grandfather and grandmother could not admire Albert and his favorite daughter-in-law. You're lucky to have a wife. What a wonderful grandson she gave us. And soon she will be a birth to a granddaughter, whispered Barry in his son's ear and glowed from the happiness that fell on his head like a polished samovar. We will thank her all our lives for the continuation of our family. Barry could not stop praising his daughter-in-law. What was the husband thinking about? Hillary rested her head on Osborne's shoulder. The word husband made him dizzy. At that moment, Osborne felt like the happiest man. He had sorted out all the problems related to his ex-wife. After that incident when Osborne almost took her life, Elizabeth lay low and didn't bother Hillary anymore. She kept a certain distance from Albert, did not bother them with his stupid and idle chatter. True, a couple of times called Osborne, but it was purely business calls and to his new family had nothing to do. Elizabeth, continuing to live with his parents, tried to meet with a man, but realized that this is not her man in terms of relationships.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.